Way to answer that. Okay. Now, so you would go from the mano, mane, and ire, the forces, the primal forces, into their manifestation of partikai, partike, and particum, standing scalar wave grids, and they build up to become kilons, and kilons build up to become kilon codes. Now, there's an interesting place you can take it from that. Okay, you got kilons over here, so this one little sheet can get you through that discussion, okay, when you're teaching people. Now, I'm going to flip back to this. That's too high. That's too high. That's too high, I think. Well, I think it's all right. I'll just move it around like this, okay? Now, so if we get down to a number 2, emanations of Akasha, partikai, partike, particum, kilons of creation. All right, we just talked about that. You would let people know about that, the connection between the mane, and ire. It's hard to say fast. And that connection to partikai, partike, particum, and partikai standing scalar wave grids, which form, kilons and kilon codes. Now, kilons and kilon codes are worthwhile touching on if you're going to teach, any of this, because these become other things. When I'm going to talk about number 3 in a minute first, because this is extremely important to bring to people. This is more of the consciousness stuff again. All right, we talked about structure and substance and order and those things. But here we're bringing the consciousness that it's all about, like the consciousness, the motivation, the intention, the desire behind the structures. So we'll get into that. But when we get down here, this is a part that's going to be important. And this little thing, even on this one page, there's enough in that little description there's enough to teach somebody just coming into it, where they will have a very important piece of information that will help them understand more stuff later, that they'll come across other things later. Oh, that's where that goes. Okay, I get that. Like when they want to understand DNA. So we'll go from up there to the things we just talked about. Then we can go into the consciousness of this. All right, we have these structures, the primal substance being partikai, partike, particum, the force behind it, the mane, the ire, and the mano. They form kilons. These are part of structure. All right, goes into structure. Then, the all-oneness. This is a motivation. This is the reality of what's taking place. This is behind all the structure and behind all the manifestation, what the is really is. The is consciousness that has intention. When we talk about this scalar wave grid that's called a time matrix, that's formed by partikai, partike, and partikai coming together. You have to say it slower. Coming together to form kilons and forming these massive scalar standing wave grids. What is that? That is a unified field, right? It's a unified field of what? Partikai, partike, particum? Yes, primal units of consciousness. Okay? So, the unified field is, when you take it to its purest and core form, it is a field of mano, mane, and ire. All right? That takes the form of partikai, partike, particum, standing scalar waves. All right. Now, this means that all this structure we've been talking about, all of these primal substance units, we begin to feel like biologists that just dissect things. These are living. We've talked about it, but there's a feeling that goes with this. These are living forces of consciousness. These are people that take the shape of scalar waves. So do we. We are actually made of scalar waves. So we consider ourselves conscious and sentient. We consider ourselves beings that have our own ideas and desires and things we'd like to create and feelings we have about things. The mane, the mano, and the ire also have their own feeling and intention and thought. It's thought different from us because they don't need a brain, because they're forces that work a little differently as far as their consciousness is immediate. Their creation is immediate. But if we begin to understand and start to relate to the structure that we've learned and relate to the energy stuff we've learned about energy and its movement and where it goes and what shape it takes. But now it's time to get to know who it is, to get to know the who of the what and the where. And this is what we will learn with the primal forces. All right? The all-oneness. At-one-ment. What is that? At-one-ment. Being at one with something. no separation between you and it. This is actually the true state of existence. We see separation between, objects in space only because we have certain parts of our scalar waves turned off, so we can't see those parts of them. They don't pop into holographic expression. The whole hologram is a thought form. And it can seem really strange. The mental body can say, okay, hologram is a thought form. Yeah, okay, I can understand that. And there's enough physics behind it. Yeah, it could make sense. But the emotional body goes, huh? I'm stuck here. If I go walk in front of a car, I'm going to get splattered. When my tooth hurts, it hurts. I'm in a body. It is physical. It is a physical body. It's a refracted light pattern, actually. You have light refracting all over the place within the true form that you are. The true form that you are is standing scalar waves, part of K, and part of Cum. So the true form that you are is Mano, Mane, and Ire. This is you. These forces are you, but they are also the universe. These are where you and universe, you and planet, you and other people, you and galaxy, you and universe, you and God are at one mint. There is no separation between you. You are the same stuff and the same who. Now, we get into it one mint. There is one spirit. That's all. Just one. One spirit, one self. One self that wears many masks, but it's one self. In all creation, one self. Even the Mano, the Mane, and the Ire. They are one self, looking at each other, deciding, okay, self, let's do something with ourselves. You go over there and look back this way, I'll go over here and look over this way, and we'll be able to see it as if we're not the same self. Neat idea. There's some of the games that the consciousness plays. The consciousness of God is very playful. It's creative. Did you ever watch a creative kid where they don't even care what they're painting? Give them a set of paints and some paper in a quiet room where they don't think anybody's watching. And if they really feel that creative spirit, they'll make all sorts of stuff. And at first they don't really care what they're making. They just are expressing. There's a playfulness and a passion about creation that is the natural characteristic of Source, of God. And the Mano, Mane, and Ire embody that, different pieces of it, different aspects of it. But passion is allowed. It's supposed to be where that energy is, where you feel passion, where you feel, oh, there's a lot of energy behind that. I'd really like to go do that. Now, if you get a real surge of energy on it, it can be coming from two places, really, the whole you, or the piece of you that's twisted and refracting and bouncing around in you from your shadow. Now, if you look deeply, you'll find the shadow stuff, you might find an impulse to do something, or almost an urge where your body seems to want to drag you with it. That's your shadow. There's another kind of passion that the shadow can't feel. And it's a spiritual thing where you just, it's like you feel this energy come into you, and you just feel it. I know you've probably felt this. I don't think there's anybody that hasn't felt it, at least in a moment. Maybe it was in childhood. Some people it was in infancy. But some people working with meditation and things are finding pieces of this. The trick is to keep it there all the time, because it usually goes out as fast as it came in. This is the Mano, the Ire, and the Mane moving in the body. Just a tiny bit, because right now it's hard for them to move in there because of the mutations in the DNA. Imagine what it would be like to have that passion all the time. There'd be so much passion, passion becomes something else. It becomes isness. It becomes a state of absolutely engaged disconnection. You don't care anymore. You can create anything in the universe. You find at a certain point, you can create anything. So you find that, oh, now that I can create anything or have anything or be anything or do anything, maybe I'll just rest a while. All of a sudden, the desire to have to create goes away. So what happens is creation becomes something that it's only done because you want to at the moment. There's no more have-tos. Shadows do have-tos. Shadows live in panic land, in lack land, where there's always not enough of something, or always too much of something else. And there's always something that isn't right that has to be fixed, so you're never where you need to be right now and here. You can never be because you're not what you should be, what you want to be, where you want to be, with who you want to be. This is the shadow space. When we get into the Mano, the Ire, and the Mane space, we'll progressively open into our bodies. This means we'll not only be able to think about it, we'll be able to start to feel it with our bodies. with our emotions. It's a state of at-one-ment. And you'll get little bursts of it at first, and then the reversals shift back in from the planetary grids. Where'd it go? You know, I felt great 10 minutes ago. Where'd it go? It was a rush. Where is it? And then the shell will go, it's not there anymore. I'm lacking it. Oh, no. Right? But if you work with the technologies that we're going to learn today and the ones that will come after, you'll progressively be able to embody more and more of the experiential state of the natural at-one-ment. Because see, what's so funny, and funny in a sad way, is that all of the things that we would all like to be able to experience, and everybody has their own little twist on what their particular thing is that they'd like to know and feel and have and be. It all exists right now. People that feel, I just wish I had love. Where isn't it? We breathe it. It moves through our bodies all the time. The problem is we can't recognize it because we become desensitized to those feelings because of what's shut down in our cells. We will begin to find that all the things we thought were lacking are here and always have been. We just forgot. So we'll begin to feel what it means to be in at-one-ment, where that panicky little shadow thing, that everybody gets a kick of it here and there. I mean, if not, usually something comes from you in the hologram and says, here, we're going to take your house away from you. This big back tax bill came up, and if you don't come up with $20,000, you know, you don't have a house anymore. All of a sudden, your hologram of peace is shattered by one little piece of paper in the mail. You know what I mean? Oh my God! You know, shadow goes, oh, I'm going to be homeless. There comes a time when you don't manifest that stuff anymore, because we're still manifesting it. And what's tricky about all this is, no matter how much we get control of our minds right now, we are still going to manifest the victim-victimizer drama as long as these implants are in the planetary grids, because they keep putting those reversals, which are static interface patterns, back into our DNA. So we can clear our DNA, and it gets dirty again as soon as we're on planet. As soon as we flash back on, there it is again. What we're going to do with the exercises that we're going to learn with radial body healing, radial body activation, we're going to progressively use the Akasha currents, the highest levels of them, to reset and hold in place the natural form of the lowest ones and then move it up. We'll be moving down and up at the same time, so progressively clearing the radial body levels, which means progressively we will be purging out and getting rid of that victim-victimizer thing that keeps messing up what we're trying to manifest. Progressively we'll get our shadow back, and we'll find out it's our friend. And that's good, because you can't just cut your shadow out and leave it someplace. You know, it's going to hold you back and draw you back. So, anyway, get into the oneness, the one spirit, one God, one self, one love. There is one love. It is all love. And it is pure love. There are people here on this planet and others that can act very unlovingly. It is not because there isn't love there, and it's not because they're not even made out of love. They're made out of love too. They just don't know it anymore. All right. The intention of all creation, the first intention, even after this, it was divided into three to have three separate intentions so externalization could take place. The first intention, and the thing that you will always go back to, if you're going to go back through all of the currents of creation and back through all the levels and back through the Manet and the Ire and the Manel, there would be one last thing that you would expand back into when you get into full at-one-ment with God, and that is absolute love. You are at harmony with everything because everything is made out of you. It's not separate at all. You're in a state of vibrational harmonization. So these are some of the things that we're growing toward. These are some of the things that we're not just going to be able to protect ourselves from frequency fences and unpleasant things on the planet. These are some of the expansions of consciousness that we'll begin to embody. And when we do, it's kind of funny, because once you get there, it's like what I talked about yesterday about going to inner earth. Oh, yeah, I remember here. Oh, well, that's right. I was like thinking it was going to be this, oh, wow, something I never experienced before. Oh, wow. But when you get there, you realize you always were there. And it's just kind of like you scratch your head and go, yeah, I get it. Right? Where you realize that you were perceiving in two places at the same time. The part of you that had the filters and that didn't know about the other part anymore, and the part that knew the game all along. So it's a very interesting process of rediscovering yourself, and as you do, realizing you knew yourself all along anyway. So And eventually we will go back up into where we recognize each other in the same ways. It gets funny sometimes, especially when they don't recognize you. When you all know you're one being, and you look at each other, you can fight with each other. There's people that have all sorts of energies between each other. Excuse me, don't you remember? We're the same person. You go, what do you mean? I'm not you. I don't like you. I don't like the way you dress. I don't like the way you look. I don't like what you do with your life. But we're still one person. Another thing we'll discover as we go back, God, and that means us too, has a really funny sense of humor. It's a very, very good sense of humor. The universe is very creative and very funny. Humor is allowed, it's permitted, it's absolutely essential. And you'll find you get to laugh at yourself. And the more you can laugh at yourself, the more you can laugh at everything around you. And the more love you will feel for people who are acting wacky. Okay? If people who are acting crazy, I mean, you see like countries going dropping bombs on each other's head. Okay? Now that can get really distressing if you're looking at it from there. But once you start to understand how energy shifts and the fact that it's all eternal, and you start to get another perspective, and after a while it is just funny. It's funny in yourself when you start to catch yourself in victimizer games. You go, oh, here we go again. It's like, I thought I got rid of you. Shadow, come here. I want to talk to you outside. It's one of the things to do. That's a very good way to handle it, too. If you find yourself getting into it with somebody, think, shadow, okay. Now, of course, they have one, too. You're not blaming anybody here. You're not saying, oh, it's all my fault. Of course not. Say, I'm having a shadow issue. Excuse me. Then go talk to your shadow. And when you talk to your shadow, the best thing to do, because shadows don't like to be rational or reasonable at all. That's not what they're about. They're a chaotic pattern of our own consciousness. So the best thing to do, shadows are like babies. And one of the best ways to put a frantic infant to sleep so it gets calm again is to sing to it. Especially if you sing songs that calm its frequencies down. That's what these songs are about. That's what the songs are about. So when we are working with this one technique, it's going to take me a while. I'm going to have to read this piece by piece, these sound tones that we're going to get in the exercise today. But if you can memorize this is the ultimate lullaby. All right, you can use this and with the Lyra song, the Song of Lyra. That's another powerful one, by the way. If anybody's like really played with that, this one triggers your Maharic steel to activate instantly. All right, now it doesn't. If you don't activate your Maharic steel the regular ways first, it won't do that. You have to, get your body used to doing Maharic steel. But the Song of Lyra, the Christos song, will immediately pull up your Maharic pillar, at least temporarily. All right, these other songs that we're going to learn, and they're a mouthful. Song of Lyra looked easy compared to some of these. There's only 4 lines. There's only 4 lines. But there are so many little syllables of sounds in those lines, and some of them are so similar. You go, wait a minute. So I'll save that discussion for later. You'll see what I mean. And before we get to the song, we're going to find out what exactly those sound tones mean, where they go. Okay. So anyway, we get down through the oneness, the one mind, the one form, the one thought, the one song, the one light, the one heart, the one mind, the one form, the primal life field of conscious, living, eternal, unconditional love. That is what the core substance of everything is. If we can begin to first get our minds used to what that might mean, then we can start to prepare our bodies for what that feels like. And that's when you go beyond words. That's when you struggle to find words that can even touch around the edges of that feeling. When the life forces start to wake up in you, the living force of God starts to wake up in you. And I don't mean the living force of God, hell, come down like they do in some of the churches, like, and you make sure you listen to your preacher and you do your Bible, that kind of thing. It's not, this isn't the kind of force, all right? These are like life forces, smack, right, that they're talking about. We're talking about life forces, the power of you and God being at one with each other. It's what they're trying to get the other way. But they're like using the force of the Bible is like, to beat people over the head with. They're using the wrong kind of force. But when we start to feel this in our bodies, we'll become where we need words less and less, but you'll also find a perplexing thing happening where you have so much you want to tell everybody and so much you want to let them know, because you know what would help and you know what would make them feel better, and you know you can have such a good time knowing this together, and you realize you can't find a word that can even explain it to yourself. Every word you try is like this big because the feeling is this big, right? But that's part of the game. It's time. I'm 10 minutes past time? Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've been, I was just letting you know. Thank God for him, because when I get going, I don't see clocks. They like hyperspace for me into another dimension or something, because I really tune it out. It's set up in there already and everything?
It's all ready to go.
Okay, it's all ready to go. When we get back, we'll move through this a little bit faster. We'll pick up on Chelons of Creation and God Fire Alphabet. That's an important part of it. Enjoy your lunch. We left off somewhere around the all oneness and before the cosmic light bulbs and sound bites. Okay. Now, if we can bring back into focus, what we were talking about was how the forces, the primal forces of the mana, the mane, and the ire move through the structures we know, become the structures that we know, the particae, particae, and particum. They build up to become the particae scalar standing wave grids that are the templates for the time matrix and for everything that enters the time matrix. We've talked about the oneness with the one spirit, one God, one self, and one of all those other things. In other words, it's all one. We've talked about what it feels like a bit to carry that oneness in your body, to carry the one-ment with you, where you can still have a body and know the separation, but also know the one-ment at the same time, which is really the state that we're looking for. When we go into a state that would allow us to be, let's say, a fully activated avatar being, a fully active avatar being has the ability to stay in the hologram and take themselves out whenever they want to, and they hold both states of consciousness in the same place, in the same space. They know they are separate in relation to the dynamics of the hologram, but they know the hologram is like a stage play that's being put on, and really it's all the same person just playing all the roles. So there's a really unique state of consciousness that we find when we begin to go into the at-one-ment space. The key to the at-one-ment is the primal force, and the primal force takes the form, first of all, as the mana, the mane, and the ire. As we move into combining what we know about structure with what we're learning now about the forces, we will find that manifesting itself as the structure of the 15-dimensional time matrix, of the Cathara grids, of the structures that we've learned, that the primal forces break themselves down. All right, just like the Manau was one force, and out of that force it took part of itself and made two. It made the ire and the mane. Well, those forces continue to break themselves down into smaller aspects of consciousness, smaller forces. When we combined the knowledge of the structure with Cathara grids and dimensionalization and all of that kind of thing with the knowledge of the consciousness fields of the primal forces, we find there are a bunch of different currents of consciousness, a living life stream that comes down, how we get the frequencies from the highest spaces of at-one-ment into the tiny spaces of the illusion of separation is through a stepping down process where the consciousness itself, one stream of consciousness breaks into two, then each one of those two will break into two. And there's a format that coming down through the Cathara grid. Now in Cathara we learned about the two Cathara grids. There are 24 points. The first cosmic Cathara grid that forms the primal sound fields and goes into the primal light fields, and then the other Cathara grid that goes from D12 down to D1. There are primal force currents that literally follow that path and break themselves down. So there is a different set of currents for each density level and for each dimensional level. When we get into studying radial body, we begin to find out exactly where they are, and that's where we find out about prana and mana and all the other different funny names that you hear here and there in metaphysical literature. You get to see where they fit. And it's in the combining of these. This is what language is actually really about. All languages that have ever existed originally came out of the original patterns of the divine blueprint and the consciousness currents and the sound tones or the vibrations that those sound tones made. So they're like the word mana. It was a sound tone that came out of the larger mane. When we have eros as one of the currents, it came out of the larger ire. All of the words that we use are actually little tiny sound bites of the original larger forces of consciousness that are alive all around us. When we begin to use The ancient sound tones, the whole tones, the tones of the words themselves, the vibrational patterns themselves, we call more and more of that living life force that's all around us all the time. We call more of it into our embodiment. And with that comes more of our at-one-ment. That's why we use, in any of our technologies, we're always using sound and we're always using symbols. Symbols are patterns. We'll talk about in a minute. They're patterns called geomancies. And geomancies do a certain type of thing. They hold a mathematical pattern of intention. The intention of creation that was held originally when Source created itself as the Mane, Manau, and Ire. That intention gets downstepped, and it would be in the form of what we would call mathematics here. So geomancies actually hold, they're living forms of the life force, the forces, that take on the shape of the symbols. When we look at symbols and we use symbols in the work that we do, we see just a symbol on a piece of paper. But what that symbol actually is in its whole state, it is a being. It is a part of one of the consciousness streams. So when we begin to work with the symbols, again, we're co-creating. We're not just creating or saying, okay, I'm going to make something do something by using this something. What you're doing is you're entering a relationship of co-creation. You're calling upon the power of the symbol and the part of you that is manifest as that particular mathematical program. There's an intimacy that comes when we begin to realize that symbols are alive. And that can really be sometimes best understood by realizing that we are all symbols. When we look at each other or ourselves in the mirror, we're not seeing the whole reality or truth of what we are. We're seeing what this thing we call ourself appears to be under certain conditions. We see a body shape, it's a bipedal body shape, it looks like a thing that we call human. This is the symbol level of ourselves. Well, when we see the geomancies that we're using, the symbol codes that we're using, this is their outer body, what they look like on the outside. But they are conscious, thinking forms of the primal forces that are intelligent and sentient on their own. The symbols can teach us many, many things. They're things that that belong to us in the first place, because actually we exist as these symbols. It's not as if the consciousness of the symbols is like an archangel or something you worship over there. It's not. The symbols are part of the consciousness that everything down here in the lower dimensional fields are made of, including you. So you have a part of yourself that exists in those symbol forms. There's an intimacy in working with the technologies when you realize that from the start. When you realize you're using more than just, say, a dry technology. Okay, I do this and it makes this happen. This is like, oh, hello. Who are you? You're a part of me and I'm a part of you. What are we going to create together? There's an awareness, there is a backflow of energy that if you move a thought toward one of these symbols and learn to quiet yourself and receive, it will communicate and it'll talk back. So they're interactive. That's something that it's not just the Manau codes that we'll be using in this workshop. In fact, we're going to be given one. They seem to give us one every workshop, that they're doing Vecca codes in, and have us work with that one for a while. This one's going to be, I thought they were going to save this one for last, but the one they're going to give us, and it's going to be tomorrow morning. That's one of the ones that we're doing on the beach. We're introducing the visual part of what we're doing the sound part of today and this afternoon. But it's going to be the one that applies to density 1, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. I figured they'd work their way all the way down, and eventually the final one we'd get to where we could actually maybe start moving things in, where we could see it in our field of immediate perception. But they're starting with this one. So this ought to be interesting when we begin to use the living consciousness of the mathematical programs of the Manau and the Ire and the Mane as they exist here within our bodies. Once we find that connection in our own bodies and find that piece of the Manau or the primal force alive within us, we start to have what's called a co-resonance, or a vibration that is not just about us. We start to be able to feel as part of our own self the trees, the part of the trees that hold that same consciousness, the part of the grass, the part of the planet, the part of the sky. We start to be able to feel the parts of each other. So we begin to feel the at-one-ment. I remember, I have little memory clips of certain time frames when we were involved in mystical schools. And particularly like in the King Arthur period, there was a lot of this going on, where certain ones of us were entrusted as keepers of the ancient knowledge, and we worked with the elemental forces. We were in training then for what we would need to do here at this time frame. We knew we would be, all of us would be incarnating back. But we could go out in the middle of a storm. I have a very clear image, and I feel it. Like every time I remember this memory clip, it's like a Kodak moment from the incarnational photo album, where we were playing with the sword, the Excalibur sword. And the Excalibur sword was actually the staff instrument. It was one of the Stargate tools that the guardian races had left here for certain purposes of opening inner Earth portals to visit back and forth. And it was held there was a sword made to hold it, and it was held in the handle of the sword. But this was a very powerful tool. It held D5 frequency, and it held it and anchored it into density 1. And most people, unless they knew how to hold the man-out and could hold the man-out force alive and awake within them, you couldn't hold the sword for very long. If you tried to lift it up over your head, it would start to sing, and it would start to vibrate, and it would knock most people on their bottom. And we were being trained in how to slowly open the man-out force and stabilize it in our bodies, so we would be able to become at one with it. And if we became at one with it, it wouldn't throw us. We would be able to literally hold that power. And I remember lifting the sword up over my head, and it was big. It weighed more than I did. I mean, I was a little peanut, skinny little female in that lifetime. And I remember just feeling the mana move through me, and I was able to lift it up as if it was a feather. And it was in the middle of a thunderstorm on a beach, and it's like the waves were whipping up. It was a lake, and waves were whipping up, and big gusts of wind, and there was lightning all over the place. And I held it up over my head. And this was something we were warned by our teachers, never, 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 never do that, because the thing was a lightning rod. I mean, it drew energy in, and it could, it was known to have, fried quite a few people that thought they were too big for their britches and decided, oh, I can do that, and they couldn't. And I remember feeling the force of the man-out in me, the aliveness move through me, because my codes were starting to activate then. It was like the junior training round for, this time around. And I remember picking it up, and before the teacher could stop me, I lifted it up over my head, and I knew the bolt was coming. I just knew it, and a lightning bolt connected with it. And I felt this shift happen in my body. There was one moment, a window, where I knew I could have been fried instantly. I was going to be electrocuted. And then the mana did something, and I felt its presence come in. I became the mana, and I could feel it. It became me, I became it. That level of God's self opened up in me in that moment. And we became one with it, and we rode the bolt. It just, just like holding the sword. And this got me in so much trouble because I was a girl, and girls weren't supposed to be able to do that. Only the guys were supposed to be able to play with the lightning bolts and the swords. So this is some of the potential of working with the elements. I mean, being able to have lightning decide it was going to work with you instead of just fry your circuitry as it went through. This is the power that the mana force within you has, because it is a co-resonant field. It is a field of love, or vibrational harmonization, that you will have with everything else that has the mana in it. It is the God knowing the God, and there is no conflict in that space. This is the potential that's coming back now. I haven't seen Excalibur in years, so I don't think it's anywhere where we can use it these days. But this is the power we're going to start to begin to feel. We need to give ourselves permission to feel it too, because there have been so many abuses of power on this planet, and so many of us have got tripped up in the karmic loop of the victim-victimizer game, that when we think about, wow, that kind of power, where actually the elements would bend to our wishes. Wow. Some people go, ooh, do we deserve that? What if I mess up? Maybe I shouldn't have that much power. Maybe that's the only power that should be for gods and things. We've learned to be afraid of our own power because of the things that have happened on this planet. So we need to give ourselves permission. When we work with the mana forces, we need to give ourselves permission to allow that to happen and to trust ourselves again. And if we trust, we will create good use of the mana. But if we move into it afraid and afraid of ourselves, it will reflect it back to us. So it's a power that should be respected when we begin working with it, because it's a power that you can turn against yourself without meaning to. This is why when you work with any of the codes that, when we get into the manifestation sequence of the tones that I was talking about before, you want to be in a good space when you use these, or use them with the specific intent of getting you into your Krista space. You can use them to shift things if they're, not where you want them. But don't use them for see if I can make that happen. And don't ever use them to try to inflict your will on somebody else, even if it's for what you think is a good purpose. If you're inflicting your will on somebody else, you're going to create a mana loop, which means what you send out comes back, but it comes back amplified. This is how this power works. if you look at it as a sea of Manau, that we're all actually parts of consciousness floating within that sea of Manau, it communicates with itself continually. Our thoughts come in and go back out, and they go out and they do stuff when they get out there, just like we're affected by the thought field that we're walking around in. So when we get into working with these powers, it's healthy to recognize from the beginning that they are powers. And it's also healthy to recognize that power is not an evil thing. There's a lot of belief systems on this planet that have taught us and reinforced, be afraid of power. You know, you're supposed to be sheep. Sheep don't have power. All right, only the shepherds can have power. Only the lords of the rays can know how to direct the rays. We're supposed to be the lords of the rays within ourselves. They don't tell us that. We need to realize that there's a responsibility that goes with it, but we're capable of it. To not be afraid of it, but to not treat it with less respect than it deserves, because the Manau itself will teach us that, nope, that's not the way to do it. You know? So anyway, when we move from where we had been, going through the oneness, you know, coming from the Manau down through the emanations of the Akasha with the primal substance units, into the all-oneness, and then into what I call the cosmic light bulbs and sound bites. This is talking about the unified field. The light bulbs and sound bites, that's an easy way to help people that you're going to teach, you know, that don't know much about this, how to remember it. The cosmic scalar grid, the unified field, the light bulbs that flash off and on and pulse consciousness into and out of manifestation. The consciousness takes on different types of characteristics, each having a different vibration, which gives it a different name. But it's still all the same consciousness, just manifesting itself in different ways. So you go into light bulbs and the sound bites. The sound bites would simply be, when we talk about part of Kai, part of K, and part of Come, when you have the flash on, you have light. When you have the flash off, you have vibration, or the silent sound. So the sound bites are the part of Come stage of the part of Kai phasing, when a thing is turned off, when the light bulb is off and just vibrating, and the turn on oscillation is the light, all right, is the light bulbs. Very simple way to get it across to people, because what you don't want to do, unless you want to give a master's course, then you like get out your Kathara manual and the other things and get into all the detail that's in there. Just get across the idea that you're dealing with templates of light and sound, but not just light and sound as we know it. Pre-light, the thing that comes before what we call light, and the thing that comes before what we know as sound. So they can understand that there's a level behind this. It's not just talking about this stuff we see and the things we hear, that there's more to this. You get that across, they'll be able to follow the rest. All right, now we go from the unified field and the tree of life and knowledge. This is where you would take them into, very simply, the Kathara grid. All right, basic cosmic order stuff. You know, the Kathara grid. We can just stick that out. I'll whip through these really fast here. In about, okay, I think, yeah. So you'll have these diagrams in the little packet. Explain the Kathara grid. You can, you know, read what's on the diagrams to them and say, here, that's a Kathara grid. There are two of these. You have one that goes from the primal sound fields that begin with the original part of K, part of Kai, and part of Come, the original Mane, Manau, and Iri. And there's one set that comes down of 12, and then right where the number 1 is on that one, another set, the 12 on the set below it, would be there. Get that much across to them. They understand the basic template that we're working with. There are 24 points of primary focus, where what was once 1 that became 2 that became 3 has now become 24 points. These 24 points are going to set the patterns for the dimensional structure and for the breaking down and polarization of light and sound, or for the arrangement of Partakai phasing, of how those light bulbs are going to flash off and on, how fast, how often, and at what angles in relation to each other. That's where the mathematical program of what keeps this consciousness in motion, what keeps this reality field where you can have a hologram in motion. It is the Kathara grids that hold the mathematical patterns. The mathematical patterns are called geomancies. They're the symbols that we use. So that's not too hard to get it across. Oh, that's a symbol, that's a geomancy. Oh, the geomancies are the things that are in the Kathara centers, right? That are holding the consciousness, that's holding the intention of keeping the manifestation framework in order. So the Kathara centers aren't just things, they're beings. Each of your Kathara centers is a part of your consciousness. Just like a symbol is a being, so are the Kathara centers. If you can get across when you're teaching these things that the structures you're teaching of are not just structures as we think of them in 3D out here, because we're taught to think of inanimate objects, let's say, that have no life force. Therefore, they're not alive. Therefore, they're things, not beings. It's not recognized by the general scientific communities here, and we're not taught this from the time we're small like we should be, that energy is consciousness and consciousness is energy. Therefore, everything is a being. So if you can get across to people while you're teaching them about the basic structure, that you're talking about being structure as well as thing structure, it will help them to develop just the core of understanding, the seeds that they're going to need to really work with the Manau and the Ire and the Mane. Because these are forces of consciousness that require you to recognize that they are forces of consciousness before you will be able to successfully direct them to do much. If you enter it with an attitude of, I'm going to make it do this, you might get away with that for a while like the fallen angelics have, but it always creates a backdraft where it either makes it where you don't have the power to do it anymore, or it brings some things back to you to teach you not to. If we go in with the recognition that these are consciousness things, this is a relationship that requires etiquette. It requires basic manners, you know? This isn't an energy you're going to boss around. This is a friend you're going to say, wow, look at this. There's this Manau force of consciousness, a living conscious energy, part of God that gave itself specifically to me and to anybody else equally without any judgment. It was a field of power that said, you may use this to create, and you may create whatever you choose, unconditionally. It's a field of massive love. This is what this power is that we're going to work. The Manau is a love field. It is the strongest field of all of the other two, like all of them put together. If you take the Manau, that is the stronger one compared to either the Ire or the Mene, and it's also the strongest one compared to all the smaller currents that come out of any of those three. So we would go from basic Cathara grid to Cathara grid in the body. Say, here's where that structure anchors in your body, and you've seen these before in Cathara. These would be where the flash-on pattern, let's say, of where the primal light fields come in from the higher dimensional structure. I think I wanted to show this one first. Yeah, I should have shown that one before this one. Yeah, we'll put this right back on, but I won't put that one on. No, not that one, this one.
Oh, the other one.
It's fine. Thank you. Okay, yeah, you'd show them this, okay, before you show them the Cathara grid in the body. All right, just basic 15-dimensional structure. This one everybody probably just sees in their sleep at this point because it appears everywhere with all sorts of information on it depending on what we're teaching. Basic 15-dimensional structure. That is a symbol code right there that allows a certain set of frequencies that helps to convey the consciousness reality of what 15-dimensional structure is. It helps using this image. That's why we use it over and over. It's not hanging in the sky up there someplace. It is literally, this is part of the symbol structure, the mathematics that are embedded in our whole being down here in the dimensional field as part of the mathematics. So we use this, let them see it. It shows the three-dimensional mind as well, the D3 mind. Simple structure to understand. We have here we have the triadic and polaric and acadic levels. These are the primal sound field levels. They're the vibration fields. They have certain names for their currents. And later you'll take them into learning that these are the Kundare sound fields, primal sound fields. And then up here you have the 15, 14, and 13 primal light fields. And it actually starts at D13. That's the Manau level. We're going to learn a little bit more about the dimensional structure and how it works in relation to the Manau as we move through the radio body teachings. Because we're going to find out that D13 is something called 0 point. Now, there's a whole movement happening in physics, in the scientific world, called 0 point physics. It's a kind of I think, a hybrid version of quantum theory, where they're getting into trying to find the 0 point. There's a lot of research being done into, like, monatomic particles and things like that, because there's a point where a thing can be accelerated. Its particles can be accelerated, and it can actually change its molecular content and disappear and turn into light. Scientists here are finding that. What they're not realizing is they have no idea where it went. And they don't know what it turned into when it got to the other side. Because what's happening right now, the way those things are being done, there's one part of the thing that if they're going to make let's say, an element disappear, they're beginning to be able to do that. But they're making a part of it go in one direction in reverse and a part of it go in the other direction, so they're fragmenting it. So they get two reduced versions of what it originally was. And I know that one of the motivations for this type of research is, well, first of all, if you can make stuff disappear, that's very handy military purposes, right? But what they really want to do, they know that time travel is possible, all right? And they know if they could figure out that key to how the elements work, that they could apply it to human molecules, and they could hopefully get themselves on the other side of wherever that disappearing was. What they don't realize is the way they're doing it, they don't want to do that, because they're literally separating the templates, and that's creating like a phantom self and and a forward self that are pulling energy away from each other, and eventually they drain each other until there's not enough energy to sustain either one of them. But when we get into learning about radial body a little bit more, we'll find that 0 point is very important. 0 point is the Manau point. This is where the Manau from up there that would be beyond this, like a layer beyond the 15-dimensional matrix and beyond the primal sound fields, it comes through in certain areas. Certain areas are concentrations of where the Manau comes through, certain are concentrations where the Ire comes through, and certain are concentrations where the Mane comes through. If we go back to the Cathara grid for a second, I'm going to go back to this one for a minute. I don't have the graph on this. No, I'll use this one first. Thanks, honey. I don't have the graph on, like the one that goes with this yet, because it was secondary, and I can still explain it to you. When you look at a Cathara grid, the paths of the currents would be, they'd all come through 12, which would be representative of the D12 divine blueprint, and then they split, and you end up with the Manau currents going down 12, 9, 6, 3, 1, and that's called the path of Amaraya. And you would have the Mane currents going down 12, 11, 8, 5, 2, and 1, and you would have the Ire currents going down 12, 10, 7, 4, 1. This is how the currents will run, and each level they break down, the vibration changes, so the name of the current changes. So what you end up with is a string of, what look like a string of names. And if you want to evoke and bring into activation in your body those particular currents of energy, you would choose which ones by their sound, by their vibration, and you would speak it. And that would allow it to go out into your hologram, bounce back in, and the breath literally carries it back into the template where it activates in the body. This is really the simple truth about radial body activation. The sound, and then tomorrow we're going to get into the physical movements that go with the sounds, which are the sariyas. Today we're going to do the sariya songs, which are the sound tones that go with them. Then tomorrow we'll learn to incorporate into that certain very simple body movements, but movements that go with the sounds. And then when we get really good at it, we'll combine those things with what we already know, some of us, and if you don't know them, you're going to learn these too, the salutations, which are the Merkaba spins. And what it looks like when you get good at it, when you're not good at it and you're first starting, it looks like somebody trying to figure out what was I supposed to sing while tripping over my feet, and where was what arm supposed to go in what direction. But after a while, as the currents begin to flow, you can actually feel an equilibrium happen, where it becomes a living dance. The dance for life and the dance of life. The Manau knows how to do this dance, so does the Ire and the Mane within you. So as you begin to do the rudimentary things, they'll start getting it open. You're retraining your body to be coordinated as far as handling these currents. But at least you're getting them into the body for the first time in a very, very long time. These currents haven't been running properly in the body for over 25,000 years, and much longer, actually. But the real damage was from 25,500 BC and forward. So if it's funny when you first start, if you end up starting when you're trying to put, especially when you're trying to put the exercises together, we'll start it easy. Today we're going to do the sounds, right? Tomorrow we'll have our sound sheet in case we decide we want to try that too. But then we'll just work on the movements, right? And then we'll have a break. And a little while later we'll go into the salutations, or getting our Merkaba spins right. And then we'll probably at that point get the symbol. The symbol and the spin's not too hard to do together. Okay? And then when you bring the sound in with the symbol and the spin, you've added one more piece of balance to the whole thing. And the last one would be learning how to spin while dancing. You know? And I'm afraid to look at this. I remember little Kodak moments where I used to be good at this in the ancient of days when they started us, when we were like this high. It's interesting to learn it when you're not that high anymore, and your body has no idea how to do it anymore. So if you feel silly and funny when you start to work with these, realize that that's okay, first of all. It's not just you. These bodies are like it reminds me of the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. Need oil, talking around. When we first start to work with the technologies, we're giving the oil to the body. We're getting the currents back into the body. And slowly, if we practice, we will begin to balance those currents in the body where they're not just running and kind of feeling funny and we're trying to figure out what to do with ourselves, where they start to take on a flow, a grace, and a balance. And we'll find there's a still point within all that, where you actually, what happens when you get really good at combining all of those factors together. In the ancient days, when the Iyani, and now in the inner earth, when the Iyani do these things, because they do rounds and those kind of things, and they incorporate all of these technologies into their rounds, so they do very, very powerful rounds for all sorts of purposes. You get to a point where you can spin so quickly, and all of the movements come so automatically, kind of like driving. You know, if you've driven for about 10 years, you just get in and you can't even remember if you put the keys in because they're already in there because you're just on autopilot and you just do it. It becomes so natural that they can do this, and they can be at really high speeds of motion, but they perceive everything, including themselves, as being completely still. They become one with the still point, and everything just moves around them, and they don't see it as moving. They simply see the hologram of existence, and they can see past sound barriers and past light barriers and past time barriers. There's a space of full at-one-ment that can be found in the exercises. And they would do these, and they teach their little kids how to do these things just for basic maintenance of, you know, keeping your circuits oiled while you're in a manifest form. If you're going to be on a planet in a manifest form, these are the things that will allow you to keep your form at its best form and to keep your consciousness clearest. This is what the breatharians used to do to live. They didn't have to eat other things. They didn't have internal organs in the same way we do because they didn't need to process foods and things in that way. They simply breathed and danced. They did the dance of life and of love and of freedom and of joy all the time. So we're not going to be great at it when we first start. That's okay. Don't be embarrassed. Don't worry about the fact that you're with a group of people and somebody might see me, you know, fall, or I can't remember what the line was. I have to go find my paper. That's okay. Those things are okay. Give yourself permission for it. And when you go home with the technologies, you have a choice. You can put them in a drawer, and they'll sit there, and your mana force will stay sleeping. It's with you all the time, but it will stay sleeping. Or you can decide, this is worth it. Let's see how far I can go. And this is only step 1. What might step 20 be like? You know, if I can make step 1 work, I might be able to get to step 2. And if I get to step 2, I can probably get to step 20. What all of this will culminate into is the ability to build the Akasha Merkaba, which is the one that can sustain. It's, here in this system, it would be in the 12 dimensions of this system, it would be a D12 Merkaba. That is called the Mahanta Merkaba, an Avatar's Merkaba. It's called the Akasha Merkaba because it incorporates not just the frequencies of here in parallel, like a regular Merkaba would. It incorporates the frequencies of the inner earth time cycle as well. So it would allow a person who could fully activate that to pass that back and forth between the portals from here to inner earth. And it would also allow you to disappear and reappear at will. You could go into full light and stay there if you wanted to. It's kind of funny. It's like when you know you can turn yourself, you can manifest and demanifest at will, right? Whether or not you have enough money to buy a house so you have some place to put your body does not become one of your main concerns anymore. It becomes insignificant. If I don't need it right now, I'll turn it into light and just hang out that way. And then when I need it again, I'll pop it back in, right? This is some of the things that masters do. They pop in and out of realities. They spend most of their time in pure consciousness as the man-now. But they know that at any time they can pop in and out. They can say, I sense that reality field over there. If I want to see it in holographic form, externalized from me, because I am at one with it, I will project myself in. And they will do the things with their fields. They will use the vibrations of thought that will create the same effect that we do when we do the tones. And they will activate their Merkaba in a certain way to put themselves where they want to go. This is the beginning of those kind of levels of mastery. Okay, I'm going to put the other. Yeah, I'll put that one. Yeah, that one's good. Now, when you're teaching this, you go from showing them 15-dimensional system, that's the basic structure, you know, and letting them know that that's the template that these primal forces of consciousness are, you know, form as they come into manifestation. This is the structure that they form. They form the Gathara grids, they form the 15-dimensional system, and then they form in the bodies, in our physical bodies, we have a Cathara grid as well, because Cathara grids, remember, are the core template mathematical blueprint of everything in the time matrices. That mathematical blueprint was the original thought that was held in the Manau as far as how the Manau would organize itself and its relationships with itself in energy terms to create a specific type of reality field. The reality field that this time matrix was founded on was being able to have a three-dimensional holographic experience. It was a three-dimensional hologram. There are others that don't have three dimensions. They're built on different mathematics, and they only have two dimensions, where you don't get physical externalization in the same way. But in this particular system, three-dimensionality was the intended choice that Source chose when it externalized itself as the Manau that manifested this time matrix. So you simply explain to them that the biggest things and the smallest things all through the universe all are built in this core template. Every ant, every microbe, every cell, and every planet, every galaxy, every cosmos follows the basic pattern of the 12 and the 12. And the 0 point happens where in the Cathara grid you have 12 connects with 1 from the next grid going up. Remember, I said that there's this 1 and then there's another one. That takes you from dimension 1 to dimension 12. Then there's one that starts at 12, where number 1 would be there, and goes up into the primal light fields and primal sound fields. That forms D13, 14, and 15. Primal sound fields would be the same thing as these down here, but on the next level up. And these are the currents, these are the paths that the Manau and the Ire and the Mane follow as they break themselves and polarize their consciousness down into smaller units. It's like making children of themselves as they work their way down. And what they do is, when they're turned on in the body, the primal light fields flash on in this pattern. You have the main one coming down. This would be the Mane coming down from the center pillar. You have the Manau coming down this way. And actually right now they cross over at D5. This would be a little bit different configuration depending on the time frame you were born in. When the second seeding of humanity was seeded here 3 million years ago, I think it's when they were seeded here, came this way, and it actually crossed through all of the crossbars, and the Ire did also. But there had been damage to the planetary grids and to the galactic grids that had to, there was a bypass system made through the fifth dimensional frequencies. So this is the pattern that when we activate our higher frequencies that allow the Kirashe, primal light fields, to come through, that's the pattern they'll follow right now. That pattern won't change because right now it's being held literally in the galactic shields, which are the ones that control the sun and the other planets in the star system. So some things you work with instead of trying to fix and make it perfect. You work with what's there because it's too large of a shift that would cause too much damage. We can't use the Manau right now to try to change this back to what it originally was, because if we do that, we would actually create a reaction where it had to destroy itself in order to recreate itself. So right now, this is the pattern of the flow lines, and I call them flow lines because this is where the consciousness comes in, where it comes into your body. But it doesn't flow like water. It flashes on and off. It's as if this image turned on and off in your body, not as if something was poured down and came down this way. So it's literally a flashing on and off of these frequencies in the body, like turning on and off a light switch. So you could basically get people to where they understand they have a Cathara grid in their body. These are the basic paths that the Kirashe D13, 14, and 15 currents will flow. And when we move into understanding more about the radial body, we'll start to understand more about what that structure is up above them, the primal sound fields, and what they have to do with things. Because these are the heart and soul of where the primal forces come from. They don't come from this universe down here. They don't come from D12 and down. They're there, but that's not where they originate. They originate at the top of the other Cathara grid. So we'll be getting into a little bit of what that structure is. Let's see what's next. Okay. Just do shields really quick. Yeah. You would want to show them just basically how they have their Cathara grid and the shields. So they're familiar with the scalar templates. Remember, part of K, part of Chi, part of Com, which are made out of the forces, the Manau, Ire, and Mane. And our personal ones form, I have to say it fast, our personal bodies form on the shields, or the scalar shields that are our template. We have our Maharic shield at density 4, that's our dimension 12, 11, and 10 level self. We have our toric shield at density 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. We have our duratic shield at density 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And we have our telluric shield, or our elemental shield, at dimensions 1, 2, and 3. These are the scalar templates that hold our consciousness into the proper pulsation rhythms that allow us to be a part of this particular reality field down here. The pulsation rhythm of consciousness is that Partakai phasing rhythm that's held in the mathematical patterns of the Cathara grids, of the geomancies. It's the pulsation of the primal force currents. How fast they will pulse in will determine where you end up. At what angle they pulse toward each other will also determine where you end up in space-time. So the pulsations of consciousness, if we can understand that the fact right now that we're sitting here means there's a very specific pattern of pulsation of consciousness that every one of us are sharing in a whole unified field of all sorts of scalar wave patterns, not moving at all, standing still, but just going on and off. We're perceiving movement in massive cycles of linear time because we're simply following a certain set of flashes. The consciousness is flashing on and off and perceiving one moment, then the next, then the next, then the next, but really all the moments are there at once. It helps to get this across to people just so they have an understanding of simultaneous time, because it will help when they start asking questions about why am I remembering some strange things about when I used to be somebody else and I didn't believe in reincarnation. Then you have the question of, oh boy, do I get into this with them about reincarnation or don't I? Because it can be confusing if you try to explain to somebody, well, not only you're trying to get them to understand that they reincarnate, but they're all here now. What do you mean they're all here now? I remember dying. Well, you were tapping into the now point where that one did die. What? You know, it gets very confusing. But if you can help them understand the flash lines from the beginning, that's why I mentioned before, if when you're starting to talk about Partakai, Partakay, Partakam, and pulses of consciousness that are flashing them on and off, to get across the idea of flash lines, it will help you to get across the idea of time when you're trying to teach that to somebody. If you're trying to teach them that time is simultaneous, okay, well, how come I don't see it simultaneous? How come I only see this? Because your consciousness is following one of those flash lines. But there's parts of you that are following all these other flash lines all at the same time. And each of you are perceiving your own set of three-dimensional hologram. The hologram isn't really there. All that's really there is a pulsation of consciousness that's happening at certain angles to itself. So it literally bounces consciousness out and brings it back again, and it sees an externalization of its contents, just like you would see an image on a movie screen, because there is a film and there is a beam of light run through the projector. The consciousness works. The Manet works like the beam of light that runs through the projector. The the Manal and the Ire together work as a template. So together we have the projector machine and the film, and our conscious thoughts are what imbue the Manal with what's going to be on that film. And it happens all the time, whether we're in control of our thought patterns or whether they're running on autopilot because somebody else is messing with them from the D2 level and we don't know how to do it anymore. We're still doing the creating. And we're doing it by embedding ideas into the Manal field. And the Manal field creates them there as vibration, and then the Manet projects them outward into hologram. We're going to get into the series of the in-breath and the out-breath and the pause breath, because there are certain tones you use to bring the thing you would like to manifest in. They're the embedding tones that would bring them back in, the Ire tones. The Ire is the in-breath. It would take it back in, out of manifestation, through you, and into the Manal. The Manal is the receiver. It says, okay, I'll take that. Oh, this is what you want to manifest? Okay. Puts it into a vibration, and that vibration goes back out on the Manet current, and the Manet takes it into its light expression of that vibration, which is the hologram. So this is the thought process. It's these currents and these primal forces that are these are the juice that runs through the structure that we learned before. This is the juice, the power that makes it work, that makes it happen. It's the power of consciousness. Okay, go on the next, please. No, we don't need that one. They know that one enough. Yeah. And I would suggest, everybody here has done Cathara once. Yes, please. Yeah. Is that, no? Okay. If there's people who haven't done Cathara, I would suggest reading it, because you will learn a lot more about, like, the body parts and the body structures. And I'm not, this isn't a Cathara class, so I'm not going to go deeply into those. I'm going to show you enough, like if you haven't seen anything, I'll show you enough where you know these diagrams exist, and you know you're probably going to have to look at them a little better to understand how all the pieces fit together. The Cathara book, the Cathara manual, is like a how-to for the human body. So it is worth it, even if you don't want to do healing. It's worth it just to get the rundown on the more specific detail on all the things that we're talking about here. And then you will be able to understand what we're going to go into with the radial body even more. So I would suggest, if you haven't done Cathara, to at least get the manual and read it and find out what these parts are about. You'll have these charts, and these are the same ones that are in Cathara. They will be in whatever size chart pack we end up with by the end of tomorrow. And so you will have them there. If you don't have the book, you will have a copy of these. But there's a lot more explanation in the Cathara book. It's 200 and some pages, and there's a lot more explanation on how all these systems work. So, and that's only level 1 Cathara, but it's worth getting just for the anatomy course. This is I'm going to show you this because this one most of you have seen if you've seen Cathara or the Templar manual, because these are in the Templar manual too. This is the auric field levels. Each of the auric field levels corresponds to one of the dimensions. This shows 12 of them. It doesn't show the light fields that go out beyond them. This is really part of the reality of what the radial body is. The radial body is the body that radiates. Okay? That's why it's called radial. It radiates energy, frequency. It radiates all these different currents. What's fascinating is when we get to see how every one of those currents are actually woven in to every cell. So every being is actually a weaving of light and sound that's composed of not just the 12-dimensional frequencies, but also the ones that are higher. Right now, those currents are turned off in our bodies, and what we're going to be doing is progressively turning them back on and bringing our at-one-ment back. So these, I'm just showing you here, and you could show the people that you're teaching, these are what are called the auric field levels. Each three-dimensional layer of them is called a huva body, which means a three-dimensional light-sound grid, okay, or body. These are actually formed by what we'll talk about later, which are Merkaba fields. Okay, Merkaba fields are spiraling counter-rotating fields of electromagnetic energy that form at the center of them an egg-shaped energy field, which is called a form constant. It is that space inside the Merkaba field that becomes these eggs that are around all of creation. Now, every universe, every three-dimensional universe, literally is a spherical, elliptical sphere-shaped set of eggs that has all the different dimensional levels that correspond to that particular field, like density 1. We call density 1, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. That has a bubble of energy. It has 3 of them, one for D1, one for D2, one for D3. And altogether, that's called one Huva body, and that's the Nada Huva body, the one that goes with density 1. You have the Alpha Huva body in density 2. You have the Beta Huva body in density 3. You have the Mahara Huva body in density 4. And you have the Raja Huva body in density 5. That's the primal light fields. Then you have other things that are a little bit different, but they're Huva bodies, but they're structured different on the primal sound currents. So these are basic structures. Teach them about these eggs that they're walking around in. Because you need to understand the eggs to understand how to work with the radio body and with the currents. Because it's not just around your outside, the outside of your body, that these fields exist, but every atom in your body has a field like this. And there are very, very specific types of particles that form each level that correspond directly to each of the primary, what are called rays, or the 15 rays. So as we learn radial body, we start with understanding we have an auric field, and it has all these dimensional levels. 12 of them are shown here. The auric field levels correspond directly to the chakras, which are the little energy vortices that run energy back and forth through the body. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Yeah, okay, I can go there. Yeah. Now, we go back to the currents. Okay, we have, now here's where we're beginning to build the understanding of, okay, where does radial body fit in? You've got, we've talked about dimensions, we've talked about the 15-dimensional matrix, we've talked about the Cathara grid in the body, how it starts to build up and how it forms these eggs of energy around us. We've also mentioned that there's a Merkaba that we haven't shown any pictures of yet, but there's a Merkaba that forms these eggs around the bodies. Now, we're taking egg-shaped structures that happen because primal life force currents are flowing into the bodies through the Merkaba fields. Primal life force currents are the different types of currents that the mana, the ire, and the mane break themselves down into becoming. So the primal currents that form everything are alive. They are currents of consciousness, but they are also currents of energy and particles and subatomic particles and these kind of things. Okay? So if you can show people, you have your bodies around you, and these are the primal life force currents, the basics of them. These are the ones we learned before, and then we're going to see how these break down even further as far as what is the consciousness. Who is the consciousness that each of these rays carry? This is what we're going to find out with the radial body stuff. So here you have your 15-dimensional matrix again. You have, see up at the top, do I need that? No. Okay. You have at the top here, this whole area around here, the akadic. If you looked at this as source, okay, or this is the mana or the source or the beginning point, this would be the first level closest to source. This would be the next level away from source. This would be the next level away from source. And these go all the way around. Now, away simply means stepping down, okay, in vibration, because they're all in source. You can't go away from source. You are source. You're made of source. You live in source. That'll never change. But we have these areas of the primal sound field around us. They form a current of energy that doesn't pour this way. It flashes on at different intervals if the body is open to receive it. That's called the Kundalini, primal sound field. We get into the D13, 14, and 15, primal light fields. That's called density 5. That's the first level of density. That is what would be the closest you could compare it to would be a gaseous form of antimatter. Not antimatter, but antimatter. So it's like the beginning of where consciousness that was sound vibration begins to move into light expansion. This has to do with certain dynamics that take place up there in relation to the Manau void and the Ire and the Mane interacting with each other, which we get into a little bit more when we go into radial body. But it helps to understand before you go into radial body that you have the auric field around you, the Huva bodies around you, that you have these currents that are coming through. This is a pillar. This is the pillar that you're building. As you work with these activations, you're progressively putting back together this frequency pillar that you will literally be in the middle of. It will be running right through you once you get the full thing activated. Usually people start down here and they activate this, and then this, and then this, and it takes them many cycles of lifetimes to go through each of these, but they're all happening at the same time, so it really doesn't take that long if you look at it that way from the avatar perspective. If you realize you're doing them all at once, it's like going to 4 different colleges all at the same time. So it really didn't take it that long. Right? In fact, when you get to that point, there is no such thing as long or short, because time doesn't mean the same thing as it does to you when you're down here in a linear fashion. But we're building this pillar of light. This is the normal pillar of light and sound. And it's not just a pillar of light and sound. It's a pillar of consciousness. This is the stream of consciousness. This is where your consciousness comes from. You wouldn't be conscious if you didn't have some of this flowing. Everything has some of this flowing, or it wouldn't be manifest at all. Now, you have the different, this is the beginning of understanding the sound tones that go with the primal currents. We have the Kundalini. Now, Kundalini are the different sound fields, that actually 3 levels, the triadic, polaric, and akadic. The Ku sound is the triadic, the Da sound is the polaric, and the Re sound is the akadic level. So that's where we get these words. They're not just words somebody sat down and made up. They have to do with the translation of the actual vibrations. When you take those vibrations and bring them down here, which means they change, because it would be a different sound when you were up there. But to get that sound down here in a way that you could use it to bring that sound and that frequency into your body, those would be the sound tones you would use. Now, here we have the Ki Rashe for the primal light fields. Here, the D13 Ki, the D14 Ra, and the D15 She. And some of them are very similar. Some of them will have like the Ra or the Re or the Sha or the She. And there's a difference in vibration with them. Okay? Here we have the Maharata, which is the Christos liquid light field, and that's dimensions 10, 11, and 12. That's your divine pre-matter blueprint. That's where it's a liquid light pre-matter blueprint. It's called hydroplasm. And that's the beginning of where your consciousness begins to take its form out of just a gaseous thought form, out of just a sound vibration idea form, into the expression of dimensionality in holographic matter. You begin to pick up dimensionality as your consciousness moves into manifestation through this structure. Now, you have the Antankarana is a word, a big one, that's used to describe the pillar, this particular pillar of 9 dimensions of energy, dimensions 1 up through dimensions 9. They're called the universal Kundalini currents. So when you hear people talk about Kundalini, this is the part of the divine pillar or stream of consciousness that they're talking about. Now, each level of these, each dimensional level has a different name, and it's made of a different type of particle or subatomic particle unit. And this is what we begin to understand when we work with radio body, because once we understand the particles that these rays of consciousness are taking, we begin to see where things, like the particles our scientists tell us we're made out of, where they connect to this picture. We begin to understand what is in our cells and what frequency is running where, and what are these little things called atoms in our bodies, and what do they really do. Because these are the windows that the currents flow through to bring the body into manifestation. And if those windows are dirty or if they're blocked, you're going to get a distorted manifestation. That's what's been happening here for a very long time. That's what radio body, working with radio body, will do, is clear that. The Vecca codes will progressively restore the natural radio body, the natural sound tones and light frequencies of the primal currents and the primal forces as they run through you. And progressively your hologram will start to clean itself up. It won't have dirty windows anymore, or blocked ones. Okay, next one. Am I talking fast, or is it just me? I'm getting on a roll again. Uh-oh. Yeah, actually, no, that would be second. I would do that one first, yeah. Okay. All right. Now, this is where you would go from what you all would probably know from Cathar or from Templar or something. If you're going to teach Dance of Life, you would go from helping people understand they have the primal currents running through them, they have the egg-shaped bodies around them. Now you put those two together, and the next level to learn about is what's called the tissue capsule that surrounds the auric field levels. Every three-dimensional level, actually every dimensional level, has a little radial body around it, but a full radial body is around each three-dimensional level. And by the time we get done discussing radio body, we're going to find out an amazing thing. And this, it kind of dawned on me, like the pieces came together. My mind knew it, but I hadn't integrated what it quite meant yet. That hit me today. When we come to understanding radio body and its relationship to our anatomy and our higher parts of identity and our soul body and our oversoul body, who are on Tara and on Gaia or in the other harmonic universes, it ends up that the radial body that we're walking around inside, we're going to learn about the radial bodies that are around our atoms first. They're the ones we need to learn to direct first. But we have the one around the first three-dimensional levels of our auric field. What that radial body is the same thing. Imagine yourself having a density 2 body that's much bigger than this one. And just like we have little radial bodies around our atoms, the radial body around us here is the radial body around our bigger selves, atoms. We're walking around inside our soul bodies, and our soul bodies have manifest form in that level of density. It's like, how far away is your soul body? Not far at all. You're walking around in its atoms. And where is the one that we're going to be working with directly? Now, we can look at the radial body as a capsule of light and sound energy made of specific types of frequencies. These are going to be the frequencies that come out of the breaking down or the downstepping of the Manau, the Ire, and the Mane. The radial body has a different type of particle energy than does, say, the physical body. But it is just as tangible and just as real. All right, now, with the radial body, there are basically 5 levels of the radial body. One main one would surround each level of your 5 harmonic system. As you have your 3-dimensional self down here, your incarnate identity, your soul in density 2, your oversoul in density 3, your avatar in density 4, and your rishi level of self in density 5. These parts of your own identity would have their own radial body capsule around them. And you would also, each level of them would have their own, around the molecules that they're made of, the cells that they're made out of, would each have their own microcosmic version of the radial bodies. In order to get from density 1 to density 2, if we wanted to go to visit Tara in density 2 and pop out of Earth, which means we'd activate our Merkaba fields, but we would do it, and if we were able to activate our Merkaba fields to do it, what this would allow to happen was the radial body capsule that's separating density 1 and density 2 would dissolve. So you could pass through and expand through the barrier. It's almost like if we imagine ourselves nestled in the cells of our larger body, the Santara. When we activate Merkaba and things are going the right way, that radio body expands. It dissolves from what it is, and we just expand out and become that body. The body's already there. I get tongue-tied, I get brain-tied with some of this. When I think of, ooh, what does that mean? What are the potentials that come out of understanding some of this? Because you could take this really, really far. What does this mean about what you could possibly do with yourself? It means all sorts of things. But the first step, I mean, I can't even speculate right now. I'm just learning how the radio body works, how it plugs into the atoms, and how we can learn to work with it. But what does that mean we can really do with our consciousness? It means it's limitless. It means there's all sorts of things that we can't even imagine right now we'd be able to do, or at least I can't imagine them right now. But the first part comes in being able to understand that we have a radio body. It's the radiating fields of energy and life force around and within us that is the radio body. And it takes the primary form of a tissue capsule around the auric field, and also little energy capsules around all of the atoms in the body. Now, the radio body isn't just the tissue capsule. It's also what's contained inside of it. The stuff inside of the radio body that forms our three-dimensional body, that forms the consciousness of our consciousness in 3D, that forms the particles that our bodies are made out of. These are formed because the radio body forms first. So the radio body is the first part of, when I talked about the Merkaba fields that form at their center, the egg-shaped things, the first egg-shaped things they form are the radio bodies out of the particles that are from the higher dimensional fields. The radio body is a pre-light, pre-sound body. And from that, and within it, are where the other levels of the currents come in, the dimensionalized currents come in to build up the forms that we know. Now, let me see. The transduction sequence. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. Now there's paperwork. So if some of you bought the supplement to this book, you have these graphs, this much of these graphs in them, and there's paperwork that goes with it. I'm going to give you guys that, there's like part of the workshop. I'm not going to give the whole thing that's in there, but the ones that pertain to this, you will get the paperwork. That was given in Calgary. I will put it in that for tomorrow. So you will be able to read more, and it helps to read more. Like on the transduction sequence, because there's a detailed piece, several pages long, that gets into explaining exactly how this works, and this does this, and this does this. You don't need to have that much detail to learn to work with your radio body. I'm not going to go into that much detail here, because by the time I get done with that much detail, you guys will be so tired, and I'll be so tired, that we won't get a chance to do the stuff that's fun, which is begin to work with the technologies of the radio body. But the knowledge is there, it's in written form, and it will be in the chart packs that you get to go home with. Now, the radio body, most important thing to understand, first of all, is, I need a pointer here, is this little diagram up here shows one Huva body, okay? Now the Huva body, remember, is a three-dimensional capsule, three-dimensional light sound body that we're walking around in, and the radio body, at first, we're going to understand the radio body as the capsule that surrounds it, okay, that separates it from the next three-dimensional levels of energy. Okay, there's the outer thing that looks like a starburst, that's one level of the radio body. There's a trion. I remember we said there are 5 levels. You have 5 radio body levels for each of the harmonic universes going up. This is just one of those. Okay, this diagram pertains to one of those. The outer level is called a trion field, and the inner level is called a meage field, because it's made of things called mesions, and the trion field is made of things called trions. Now, these aren't the only particles, but here's where we begin to get into the types of particles and subatomic units that the consciousness of the Manet, Manau, and Ere take on as they come down and downstep into manifestation. By the time we get done with the information that we have here, we will see that there's a whole bunch of particles. And if you take an electron here, and you take it up to density 2, it's called something else. But it's the same thing there as an electron is here. If you take it up to density 3, it has another name. But it's the same thing in density 3. There's a progression of units of energy. Each one of them is part of a specific current of primal life force consciousness that came out of the original 3. And each of these form a different layer of the radial body. This one, and also the ones in your cells, literally within your atoms. So as we begin to learn about our auric field out here, in the capsule here, what we're really learning about is the same thing, microcosmically, going into our body cells. And there's one diagram, when I get to it, you'll see why I was late this morning, probably. I tried to put as much information on the one diagram that you'll be able to read it and play with it for a while, where there's enough there where you can get it. You can see what your atom is doing. You can see where these currents are in your atoms. You can know the names of them, and that alone will be very empowering, because all of a sudden you know what's happening in your atoms. You know where your man-out current is. You know what currents are shut off, and you know what needs to be done to turn them back on. It's as simple as that. If you know where the problem in the wiring is, and you know anything about wiring, you go in, you fix the problem, and the juices can be turned back on again. That's all we're doing. So you have the radial body around this way. You have the radial body around the atoms in your body as well. And there are different layers of the Huva bodies that form because of the first layers of the radial body that set the circular formation for them. The radial bodies form because of the Merkaba fields, the spiraling counter-rotating fields of electromagnetic energy. Now those spiraling fields are created by different rhythms, very specifically organized and synchronized rhythms of Partakai phasing, flashline sequences, control how fast and at what sequence different pulses of consciousness will move, and it creates a circulation system. So Merkaba fields are the circulation system by which the primal consciousness comes down through, turns into primal currents, and comes down in to form the radial body, and then the manifest holographic body and the consciousness in it, down in the dimensional fields. All right, now, let me see. All right, down here, this particular diagram shows, we start with primal life force currents, Partakai units, all right? They'd be these little guys here. Okay, over in here. The Partakai and the Partakai units. We start with Partakai, they become Partakai and Partakam. These go into 3D Partakai grids, Kelon grids, okay? Thought field grids. All right, so you have your primal units, your scalar standing waves that form from Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam. You have here these crystallizing, building up and forming more complex scalar wave patterns that become kelons. A kelon is a set of 3 Partakai flash lines that intersect at different angles. That's where you get 3-dimensionality from, because you have 3 actual single dimensions crossing through each other and bending the frequency of consciousness, bending the consciousness pulses at very specific angles to each other. This is what allows the consciousness to perceive the outward manifestation of the hologram. So we go from Partakai, Partakai, Partakam into kelons, or little crystallized 3-dimensional forms of standing scalar waves. These go next into Merkaba fields. All right, they form, these kelons are continually pulsing consciousness and energy, and because of the repeated sequences of pulsing, there is actually what appears to be spirals of energy. They're actually just flash lines. They're flashing pulses of energy, but 3-dimensional flashing pulses of energy that form Merkaba fields. Inside of the Merkaba fields is where these, what were not even manifest, frequencies of consciousness begin to interface with each other. That creates the bubble of energy that is the radial body, and inside of that bubble the Huva bodies are created, and inside of that the things that we call matter particles that form our D1 level of physical body, our D2 level of emotional body and elemental body, and our D3 mental body levels. See, every level of your identity really just has its physical, it has its emotional elemental, and it has its mental body level. You have it on density 1, you have it on density 2, 3, 4, and 5, all the way up. So really we're only dealing with a 3-body system on each level. And if you want to be in your soul body, it's not that your soul is that much higher, it's having this body, but moved up a harmonic where there's more frequencies running through each of those 3 levels. So this is the process by which Partakai units crystallize, come down into kelons. Those kelons, because of the flashing, the angles that they are intersecting with each other, their flash lines or pulses of consciousness are intersecting with each other, form Merkaba fields. The Merkaba fields come down and form the kelons in our DNA templates. These begin to take the form of the Cathara grids. The Cathara grids with those first of all 24 points of frequency, they fill out to more complex things. That's where we get the shields. All right, the catharogrids are the first primary 12, and then 24 points of frequency. In the manifest part, the part that comes from the D12 divine blueprint, this is where you have those 12 points begin to accrete or pull up from the Manau more of a similar type of mathematical program. So you're bringing more scalar waves into manifestation. This is how your shields are formed. We talk about the scalar template shields that each level, three-dimensional level of the body is built on. This is how they're formed. These come through, and here's where we get into Tryon and Mejan electrostatic units. These work differently than usual negative or positive electrically charged particles do here. They have different properties in relation to density 1 because they're particles that have to do with the other densities. When we first introduced radio body, we only dealt with tryons, myons, and dions. That was the beginning of our education, oh boy. The graph that I'll show you that I did last night gives a whole list of them. Each one, I think, creates 3. Okay, so like the Manau would have its set of breakdowns going all the way down the dimensional scale, and you would have the same thing with the Ire and the same thing with the Manet, and I'll show you what they are in a minute. But from this area of radial body, let's say these are the radial body electrostatic units that form the light sound field around your bodies and around your atoms. These are lenses. They work like lenses that break down the frequencies that are incoming, like the frequencies of consciousness, the pulses of consciousness that are incoming. They further break them down and polarize them. They bring them into what's called the DNA template. They literally form. They take the mathematical program that was originally stored in the consciousness units, passed all the way down through the catharogrid and down into the Merkaba field, down into the DNA template, brings it now into the manifest DNA. This is where you begin to make the switch over from what are considered invisible things that scientists don't believe they're there, to visible things like chemicals, like atoms and molecules and subatomic particles. The Tryon-Miage field is another word for the radial body. That is they are the primary elements. There are 3 elements. There's the Tryon field, the Miage field, and around it, the Rheon field. The Rheon field is the Manau field. The Tryon field is the Manet field. And the Miage field is the Ire field. These are the particles that those rays of consciousness break down to form the bodies around us, to literally hold our consciousness in manifestation. Okay. That's not that important, really. I hope not. This is much easier to read, by the way, like at a slower pace where you have the written text, because you can stop and say, wait a minute, what? Oh, okay, and go on to the next paragraph. And it's not really hard. Some of the stuff in Cathara is actually harder to read than that, than this stuff is. And you will have a copy of this in the things for tomorrow, as long as Kinko's cooperates. Because we have to get the Kinko's to get them made. Now, what's useful in beginning to understand all of this stuff about radio body, yeah, I think so. Yeah. This is called the transduction sequence. All right. Now this chart is the transduction sequence in what's called the miasmic body. We won't talk about the miasmic body first. We'll talk about that second, because that's something that shouldn't be there that is. But the transduction sequence is the natural process by which consciousness goes from being the no thing of the ever-existing eternal God into being manifest in individuated form in a three-dimensional reality hologram. This is the process. It goes from, now this is before we got into talking about the levels that are up higher than this, all right? This is where you hit the Cathara grid level. All right, now remember, we've already talked about before that, because we introduced the forces this time. Before you'd even get to the Cathara grid level, you have the Akasha. You have the void, the light and the sound. You have the Manau, the Manet, and the Ire. So that's where, that's the consciousness, the pulses of consciousness that become the primal life force currents that are going to come down and move through this. That's where they start, at that Godhead, if you want to call it. I don't like that word, though. It's like not God's seed, because the seed is really the Ire. And it's not the spark, because the spark is the Manet. It's the no thing. It's the, what is it perhaps, as they used to, there used to be, the word mana used to be used in, I think it was Hebrew, I think it was Hebrew translation, for what is it? It's the what is it? Is it Hawaiian too? All right. Well, but usually that's applied to the Mane. But the Manu, I don't, you can look at it as the top, whatever you want to call it, God seed, God spark, whatever. It's all of those rolled into one. You can call it the void, but that kind of makes it seem lacking. The whole thing together would be the monad, all right? And the monad manifests at different places. Like it's actually the akasha taken down at a couple of different octaves where it's anchoring to break down the frequencies into becoming the rays. So the monad starts up there. You could look at the akasha, the whole akasha, as the monad, and then there's little monads that come down off of that. But if you're looking for a word, what do you call that manau? The God spirit. You have the God egg, the God seed, the ire. You have the God spark, the God fire, the light, the mane. This is the God spirit. This is the first thing that created the other two. That's the best way I can describe it. Anyway, we have that happening up there, out there, through there, somewhere in here. We have the original creation currents coming down through the primal sound fields from the akasha, through the primal sound fields, into the primal light fields. And let's say we made it down to D12, okay? Because we're dealing with one Cathara grid here, and those frequencies would have already come down a whole Cathara grid, the cosmic Cathara grid, to get into the universal Cathara grid, which is the one from D12 down. So the currents, the primal currents come in. They go through the planetary Cathara grid first. This is before they get to you. They come into the planet's Cathara grid, which is a Stargate system. They go from there into they actually come into the, first, if you want to take this back even further, you could go galactic Cathara grid. There'd be a galactic one for the galaxy. And then there would be what's called the solar shield. Okay? That would be the scalar template that this galaxy is built on. Okay? And then you'd have the solar systems that, are in it. You'd have your galactic shield, your smaller solar shields. Each would have a Cathara grid structure and a shield template that manifested on the Cathara grid structure. And then you get down to the planetary level, where you'd have the planetary Cathara grid stargates, and you would have the shields, the planetary shields, and that's the things we work with when we do roundtables. We're running frequency into them. The frequency, or the primal life force consciousness, would come down through those. Then it would go into the planetary Keelan crystal body. It's a thought form. This is where you are building Keelan structure, where you have these units of energy that are combining into three-dimensional crossover flash lines that are forming crystallizations, thought crystals, intention crystals, where whatever intention was imbued into the man now and worked its way down this far becomes crystallized thought forms. This is what happens to every one of your thoughts, actually. They go through this whole process. And the reason they do is because you breathe. Because every time you breathe, you're moving. Whatever your intention is, whatever your consciousness is focusing on, you're actually moving it with your breath back into the manau and back out into projection through the mane. You're using the ire in, and that's your embedding current. You're embedding it in the manau. The manau is giving it the fuel and creating it as a vibration, and then it's getting projected back out. So this process is going on all the time, so fast that you don't even think about it. It's like you kind of forget that you breathe. This is what's happening when you breathe. So the frequency is coming in. Let's say this is the incoming. There's also an outgoing one, all right, at the same time. Incoming through the shields into the crystal Keelan body. From there it goes into the Merkaba. All right, that's where it begins to take on the spin from the way the flash lines are crossing over once they hit the three-dimensional state, like the three-dimensional flash line state. They go from there into what's called the planet. These would be the planetary Merkaba fields. They go into the planetary axiom template, or axiatonal lines. These are the vertical flow lines that begin to flash the flash lines into building up what's going to become the molecular form. And this is still on the planetary level. They go from there into planetary Huva bodies. This is the D1, D2, and D3 egg-shaped fields that form the planetary body. And those fields formed because the planet has a radial body. When the currents come through, they pass through the Huva bodies and the radial bodies at the same time, really. But you can look at it as going through the Huva bodies first and then into and imprinting the radial body. The radial body is where it sends the back current. The radial body splits currents up, sends some of them up, some of them down, some of them back, some of them forward, to be able to give you the weaving of light and sound that it will take to have your hologram keep being three-dimensional and externalized. So it moves through from Merkaba to templates, which was on the planetary level are the axiom lines. These correspond to what would be a DNA template in the human body. Okay, this goes into the Huva body, like the planetary Huva bodies, a three-dimensional level of the Huva bodies, like dimension 1, 2, and 3, then into the radial body. Now, there are things in the radial body called radis. The radis are conduits of energy, little like rivulets of particles that follow specific paths that will take the frequency further and break it down into what are called well, some people call them the platonic solids, but they're more than that. There's supposed to be 12 platonic solids, but they actually start as gases, and they come up to liquids, and then they go into the solids. So this is where you begin to take on what creates the image of particles that are identified as matter by science. From there, it goes into what we see as our hologram. Now, this happens on the Earth level all the time. That's the Earth's breathing system. What happens with our bodies is it goes through the Earth's breathing system, and those currents keep going and go into our Catharo grid in our body, through our shields, through the levels of our shields. Now we have the tribal shield. We have a tribal shield. Actually, we have our Maharic shield. That is our universal shield. That's our connection to the universe and the universal shields. All right, we have one above that, but we have the Rishik shield. That's our connection to the light fields. We have our Maharic shield, that's our connection to the D12 universal divine blueprint. That's where we connect to the universe, okay? We have our various level of shields. We have our telluric shield that connects us to, say, planet Terra. If we're on Earth, we have a part of us connected to Earth's counterpart in density 2 and 3. In 3 we have Gaia, in 2 we have Terra. So these shields connect us to those areas. We have our tribal shield. The tribal shield is really our density 2 level shield. That's another name for our Doradic shield, our soul shield. It's our tribal shield. This is where we're connected to our whole race. This is why everybody can see the same hologram, because we all share certain coding that's exactly the same. Certain mathematical programs in our scalar wave templates are exactly the same. If not, we wouldn't see the same reality field at all. All right? This means that our consciousnesses pulse in a very specific way, that all the way down from the time we enter the divine blueprint at D12, they begin to pulse in the similar type of way that allows us to see the same reality field that we're walking around in. It allows us to have the same pulsation of consciousness so we can see each other in externalization. And this is how we see a shared reality field. We are all manifesting this simultaneously. Our beliefs, our ideas create the reality we see, and we see a common reality because our DNA templates and our shields beneath them are holding the same mathematical programs, and then there'll be little bits of differences in them that give us our individuality. That's where we become somebody different. That's what makes you different from me and us different from cats, and, like cats different from trees, is there our differentiation comes down. But we are all the same consciousness and the same frequency of pale silver liquid light at D12. We all have the same form. That's what's amazing. The forms we have now that we identify so strongly with, that's giving us our individuation, are just masks. They're just holograms. It's like Halloween down here. You just put on a costume and call it me, right? Except we get stuck in our costumes and we forget who we were before we put the costumes on, and we don't know how to get out of our costumes. And then we get afraid of losing our costumes because we start identifying with the costumes and forget we had a we that existed before the costume. And then we get very scared of losing our costume because we think we're going to be gone, right? When we begin to realize that we are the we, in costume or not. That is always there. The consciousness is always there. And it's really interesting, and it really helps to, it can save on your budget hugely. If you just start to realize that at D12, when we finally, let's see, we get to be avatars and we get to be D12 integrated, we go up there to live because it'll be nicer and everything, we all look the same. The whole thing about who has nicer cars, who has prettier hair, who has bigger bodies, who has stronger bodies, who cares up there? We all have the same thing up there. It's all equal. We are liquid light there. It is a wonderful form to be in, and it can pour itself into anything it wants to take form. It's like that movie they have with the Terminator guy. I think it was Terminator 2 with the silver cop guy. No matter what they did to this thing, it would reassemble itself and then remold itself. This is kind of what our bodies are like, but they're nice instead of that was a bad guy character. So So this transduction sequence is the process, the beginning of our understanding of the process, by which those primal forces become primal currents, become primal structure, and move themselves down into manifestation to become primal us. All right? When it goes through the earth, this is how the earth is formed, and before the earth is formed, you have the sun that it rotates around and the planets that are part of its solar system shield, galactic shield, universal shield. Then you get into the cosmic shield. That's that first set of 12 Cathara grid points that I talked about before. You have the first set of 12 coming down from the Mano, Mene, and Ire, all the way down to the primal light fields. Right, they would be the cosmic level. So all these things would be coming down from those levels and then downstepping until they get down to the planetary level, then they downstep into the personal level. This is how everything gets fed. Its frequency. This is how consciousness pulses itself into and back out of manifestation. And everything here flashes off and on. It flashes on the on pulses, and it flashes off on the off pulses of consciousness. And when it flashes off, we don't see it because we're there. We turn back into the primal forces. We're flipping back and forth between being in the man-now force and being projected with, outside of it. We're not really even outside of it. We're in it and projecting ourselves. It's like the void around us, and we are here. It's also the void within us, the void between our cells, the void between our molecules. So we're actually pulsing on and off. We flash off and on. I've talked about this before in some of the workshops, where we're like little light bulb creatures that are being shut off and on. We appear and disappear all the time. Then why should it be so darn hard to go through a Stargate? If we're doing this all the time, you think we'd be able to do it. It has to do with where we're going when we flash off right now. Normally, we'd be able to go all the way back up into full expression with that 1 minute and then flash back on. Right now, our process is being stunted. We're being held at the D1, or the density 1 level, dimensions 1, 2, and 3, because what's happening on the planet for the last 25,000 years, we've been stuck here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. The radial body of the planet was damaged purposely, and that's a different course, and there's a lot of you who are probably familiar with it already. We talked about the Niberian Dadic crystal grid and those kind of things. It's in the Templar course manual. It's the kind of heavy stuff on the forbidden history. It explains what happened here. And the result of what happened was damage to the planetary radial body, which was damage to the planetary elemental blueprint, the molecular subatomic blueprint of the planet, the electromagnetic fields of the planet, that everything, all the life fields here, depend upon. The planet was not able to run the natural currents the way it was supposed to, and therefore all of the life forms on the planet were not able to run them either. What we're doing right now is beginning to heal ourselves. The planet is not healed yet. We're going to help heal the planet, each piece of ourself that's a piece of the planet that we heal. We put a piece of the planet back the way it needs to be. Okay, then we can go on to the next graph. Oh, we're getting into the ones that I worked on. Yeah? Which, I'll get that. That was a sign. I'll describe that on this one. Okay, it's the same thing. It's the little circle sign, the little no sign, is the sign I used because, for lack of a better option, quickly when I was doing these on the computer, was the sign for a miasm. Now, a miasm is, I believe, an electrical, an antiparticle buildup in the particle field. It's a blockage. It's a grouping of units of energy that don't belong in the scalar shields in a certain area, and they're there, and what they do is create blockage of the natural flow of energy. So miasms are also known as the karmic imprint. This is where you have distortions coming up from your other simultaneous lives right through the DNA template and manifesting in your body now. It's not as if you came in with them, you were born with them because you died in that life and came up with them this time. They're being sent to you, and you're sending ones back to the other parts of you in other time frames. So miasms are simply the distortions. These are the things we're trying to clear and heal. When we have a reversal of a mathematical program in any part of our shields, of our natural template, it creates a blockage of energy where the natural flow from our highest parts of self, from the man-now and down through our Christos, can't anchor into the body, can't fully get into the body. That's what we've had happen here. This is why we walk around in amnesia down here, because most of our self is shut off. It's still there, it's still around us, it still exists in the different levels of energy that breaks down into the dimensional currents. The dimensional currents I'll talk about in a minute. It's still there, but to be able to know that part of ourselves requires that our gene code has the ability to run the frequencies of that part of ourselves. Our gene code is directly connected to the planet, And the planet, if the planetary grids, which are the same thing like our grids, planetary shields, if they are distorted or twisted in any way, their planetary shields are a part of our tribal shield. All right, we are connected to the planetary shield. So where the planet is damaged, where it has mathematical reversals, it will show in our shields as well, which means our Cathara grid programs will be off from what they naturally should be, which means everything built on the Cathara grid, which is everything in your body, including your radio body, will end up being distorted. A miasm is the result of that distortion process. It's something that should be electrical, but it's coming through as magnetic. It's something that should be an electron, but it happens to be manifesting as a proton instead. It creates total imbalances in the natural flow of particles and the natural structure of atoms and the natural pulses of consciousness that are supposed to be able to come in easily. Okay, now on this grid, this particular diagram that's very similar to the other one, it simply shows a process. This is a little confusing. You need all these arrows going here. We had our process of frequency coming in. Now there's a backflow of frequency that we send back out. Okay, every time we inhale frequency, we're backflowing it out of manifestation and then circulating it back in. So this would be like the backflow breath from our inhales when we're inhaling here. This little V point is to show a Vecca code. This here area, we have this is our personal level. Remember, this was the one that had to do with the planet, and this is the one that was our personal, how we got into manifestation up here. We have radial body, we have the 3 Huva bodies, we have DNA template, Merkabas, Helons, shields, Cathara grid, etc., connecting to the planet. Here, the D3 level, D1, D2, D3 are the Huva bodies. So mental body level. That's the part that gives us our 3D aware mind, the conscious mind. The place where the D3 body intersects with the inner layer, or the miage layer, of the radial body is a place called the Iran point. This is a point where the pure consciousness from the higher dimensional frequencies in particle form can come through and literally refuel us here. It is the power point. Your moment of power is always in the present. It's always right here, right there, where your consciousness is stationed here. Now, if you take your consciousness right here, right now, and you hold the image of a Vecca code that happens to have the corrected mathematical program for your radio bodies, you hold it here. You're putting it here in this process, all right? You have an outflow of frequency that was coming, like, you would have your normal, see, your breathing rhythm, you're breathing in and out all the time. You would actually hold it in your mind, breathe it out, and then the next inhale, bring it back in for embedding. You'd bring it back in, it would travel all the way through. Now what it will do, Vecca code here, here's the miasm, okay? That's the distortion that it's going to fix. Every place that this Vecca code goes back in on its way back to the Mano, it will reset the natural pattern. It will neutralize by putting the right pattern with it. It'll neutralize the twisted patterns in each level of the body as we go back through. And it will go back through the planetary body and the galactic body and the universal body as well. So as we're using the Vecca codes, we are literally using our breathing ability that we do all the time anyway. We're using it to take the right mathematical programs and bring them all the way back through the whole thing. So we're not only just healing ourselves, we're healing the planet, the galaxy, the universe. We're doing the whole thing. Now, the most powerful codes to use as far as the Veccas are the codes of the Mano. That is, they are the highest, I wouldn't say highest frequency codes. Some of them are the lowest frequency codes. But these are the ones that connect directly to the Mano force, which means they can direct either of the other two smaller forces, because the Mano force was the first force, the void force, the still point. That is the force that the other two were created within, the sound and the light. So if you can direct the Mano is the one, you can look at the Mano as the embedding field. If you look at the Ire as the current that takes things back home, and it takes the idea back, takes it somewhere, it takes it to the Mano. Okay? The embedding current is the one that brings it back for embedding, and the place that you embed the idea to have it become reality is in the Mano field. That's the embedding field. And from there, the Mano turns it into a vibration, whatever it is you sent in, and it will project it back out on the Mane current, and it will go through this whole process again, down-stepping itself all the way down. See, when we think, we manifest literally on all of those levels, not just here. When we think a thought, it doesn't just appear here. It doesn't just influence here. We're creating on this whole level, because every time we breathe, some degree of our life force currents, even when we're blocked like we are right now on the planet, when their currents are blocked, there's some degree of it that's moving back into the Manau force. And once it goes into the Manau, it gets thrown down from the top again into manifestation. So we literally implant our thoughts. This is why thoughts are things. They are very real things, and they're made of units of energy and consciousness, just like our cells are made up of atoms and protons and nucleus and all those kind of things. We'll get a little bit into what those pieces are in, I think, in a minute. Yeah, this diagram was just to show you what a Vecca code does. When you put it in the mental body, exhale and breathe it back in again. It was to show you how it can take those miasms and progressively clear them, neutralize them, take them right out of manifestation by combining them with their opposite pattern. The Vecca codes will combine them with their original pattern, and anything that doesn't fit that pattern will be sent back to the Manau for recycling. And that's the process of clearing miasms in the body template.
Clear all the miasms in the future.
Yes, very good. Yeah, I didn't even touch that yet in this workshop. But I'll just touch it just a little. He had a very good point. He said also it'll clear the miasms in the future, right? Yes. And the past as well. If we realize the past and future are relative terms, they're actually places in space more than places in time. If we look at the scalar grid, or the 15-dimensional matrix, the things that are higher frequency than us right now, that we are going to move back through as we progressively get out of density, they're what we call our future from here. They're also the same places that we entered when we came down through. So we come down through our past, end up in and at every point we think we're in our present. So at every point you have a different past and a different future, but they're all aligned with each other. When you fix something running that current, you are taking it all the way through each level of the dimensional scales once you work with the Vecca codes, because you're opening up those conduits that were blocked before. So you are sending it to all of yourselves in all of the dimensional fields, in all of their time bands, your past selves, your future selves, and your present selves. So it was a very good point. I didn't get into the time cycles in this one. We get into that in the Templar manual. I don't know if you've read that, but that gets into the time cycles and the stargates and all that kind of thing. Yeah, I figured that would be a little too much to bring into this one for now. Okay. This one first. Now, we'll take it nice and easy. The Akasha Force, God Source. Half an hour left, so separately. Okay. Yeah, we'll do technique when we get back. Should we do technique before? Oh, I can't leave. I can't not show them this before they go to dinner. I've got to show them this before we go to dinner. We'll do technique in the evening. Yeah, okay. All right. Now, this is just a simple way to conceptualize for yourself the Akasha. You have the Ire sound. That didn't come first. What came first was the Manau. All right? The still point void, the God spirit. Then within the void there was a vibration, the pre-sound vibration. So the Ire was formed. God spoke and the Ire was formed. And that is the sound intention. And then from the interaction between the void and the sound, the light emerged between them and within them. All right, so this is the pattern. This is also, this is the closest I could get to an Akasha shape on the computer. I had to use upside-down hearts to do this because my program didn't have anything else. Didn't have any teardrop shapes. So upside-down hearts were the best I could do. Now, this point here would be 0 point. All right, the point where each emerged and where all are connected. This becomes important when we begin to understand the structure of the radio body. Now, here's the graph from oh, no, am I going to do that one yet? No, I'll do this one first. Yeah, we're building up to the graph that almost killed me. Yeah. All right. This, I'll show you the top part of half this first. Okay. The 15 rays and 12 domains and 7 higher and lower heavens. Now, this is the structure that's formed out of that little upside-down heart-shaped thing with the 3 flames in it. Okay? It starts with the Akasha, the Manau void, Ek. That's the still point that we talked about, the divine source. That is made out of units of partikai that as they come down, step down the dimensional scale, what they start to form. They start as partikai. Manau goes into partikai, goes into rayons, ionons and neutrons. That's each step down for each density level. They are, and in fact, if you look at it backwards, a neutron in density 2 is called an ionon. A neutron in density 3 is a ryon. A neutron in density 4 is a rheon. A neutron in density 5 is a particle, antimatter particle. Okay? These are the same things we're dealing with here, just up each harmonic. All right? The Mane, God seed, or the Ka, it's the pre-light oscillation. It's the Divine Father principle. That forms part of K, which break down to form trions, which break down to form ectrons. That's where you get ectoplasm and that kind of stuff that mediums talk about. That breaks down to form dions, and they break down to form electrons. So you can take it backwards again, and electrons are dions in density 2, ectrons in density 3, trions in density 4, and part of K in density 5. This gives you the understanding of where this fits in to the rest of that. And the Ire, or the God, I made a mistake there. I was sort of going too fast. The God spark should be the Mane up there. I'll change that before you get your copies. The Ire is the God seed. That's the Sha. And that's the Divine Mother principle. And it manifests as the Particum, and they manifest as Mijans, which are basically can be considered sound units, just like the ones coming off of the Mana can be considered light units. Okay, so it goes from Particum to Mijans to Irons to Myons to protons. These are the basic units here. They also manifest lots of other little thingies. Okay, everything from quarks, that make up different things. There's every particle that's been identified here fits into this, and it has its own correspondence with these. Sometimes you'll have combinations of various ones of those particles that form other things. You have muons and mesons and all sorts of other types of subatomic particles here. But the basic building blocks of life and the basic things that you're made of, and cells and atoms are made of, are the protons, the electrons, and the neutrons. They're the carriers of the life force in the life field. And it's the protons, neutrons, and electrons that are not working properly because of the blockages in the planetary grids that are in our Cathara grids, that they are not allowing the primal forces, our at-one-ment, to flow through into our bodies, so we feel separate from God when we're not. And we feel finite, and our bodies die and fall apart. Our hologram falls apart instead of being able to expand because it's not getting fed enough life force frequency. Okay, now, when we come down, okay, these were the first levels of the primal forces, okay? Mana, Ire. Out of that comes the 12 what are called domains. They're not exactly the same thing as dimensionalized structure. They're not three-dimensional fields yet. These are the primal light and sound fields. Okay? We have 0 point, would be the Akasha. It also connects to D13 and then to D1 as the structure comes down. Now, we take it from the Akasha down to Mana, Ire, go into the Kundare primal sound particum field. That's the first particum field, or a whole field of particum units. It's made of rheon and meson units. It's a rheon-meson field. It has the acatic level 3, and these numbers are going upward. If you're down here and you want to get to the top, acatic level 3 would be your highest one. That's the acatic level of what we call the energy matrix, that if you've looked at the Cathara book or any of that, that's where that fits, the acatic level. That sound is the Re coming down into manifestation. Acatic level 2 is the E sound. Acatic level 1 is the Ra sound. Then we go into the next level of these still in the primal sound fields, okay, the Meson field, which means, if you notice, each one of these has a Meson with it. Mesons refer to pre-sound, okay, pre-sound vibration, just like trion will refer to pre-light vibration. And when you get into trion meage field, this is what we're talking about. These units that break down and literally form the bodies, the capsules around our cells and our literally around our nucleus and around the atoms and around the molecules and around our bodies. But we're still way up here in the primal sound fields. Meson field is the next step down, the polaric part of the energy matrix. Polaric 3 is the Da sound. Polaric 2 is the Ha sound. Polaric 1 is the D sound. Notice, D, Ha, Da. Okay? Ra, E. It ends up as Re. Okay? This is where we're getting the Kundare of the primal sound fields. All right? Then the next one coming down toward light. We're not into light yet. We're still in pre-sound vibration. Okay, we have trion meage fields. That means trion refers to what? The Mane, right? Mijan refers to the ire. So it's telling you which currents of consciousness are being carried in those particular fields. There you have the Q sound, the Hu sound, and the K sound, or the Ka sound. This is where you get kunda re of the primal sound fields all together, when you put them all together. Now, the triadic 3, the polaric 3, and the ecadic 3 are the ones that come out of the Manu. So when we use kunda re, like we've been using, when we work with the primal sound tones, that's what we are using. We are calling on the Manu codes there. We are activating the highest level of the Manu frequencies. And when we use the Veka codes, we are giving them the patterns of the original manifestation, of what the original, for this time matrix, what the original patterns of manifestation were supposed to be, the divine right order that the intention was set on. These symbols that we are using are giving that back, the gift that was given us to allow us to come in here, that then got mathematically messed up, where we've been given back what that looks like so we can send it back in to reset the pattern in our field. So we use the kundare frequencies there. Now, we haven't hit rays yet. We're still in domains. See, we started at 1, ecadic level 3. The last domain will be D13, the blue flame, which is the key sound, and it's that turquoise, pale turquoise blue. It's not just the plain blue, it's turquoise blue. So we come down from the Miaj, the trion Miaj fields, into the primal light Partike fields. Now these are primarily Partike, which means they will have more of the Mane consciousness, where the Miaj fields had more of the Ire consciousness content. So you have the 10th domain would be D15, violet flame. That's the She sound. It's made out of Mijans and Trions. You have the D14 gold flame, Ra, which is made out of Trions and Trions. That's a primary Trion field. And you have the D13 blue flame, the key, which is made out of Rions and Trions. D13 is actually the 0 point that the other 2 flames come out of. That is actually a stronger frequency and a more powerful frequency than D15. 14 and 15 come out of 13. 13 is the 0 point. It's the linking point between, this would be one Cathara grid, those 12 points on one Cathara grid, the cosmic Cathara grid, and this is where the 12 points of the other one would fit. But these 3 points, these would be the 12 points of the other Cathara that I'll show you in a minute going down. That 13, 14, and 15, those primal light fields, they would be the first 3. They're the 15, the dimensions that go, 12, 13, 14, and 15, but they're also number 1, 2, and 3 going up to the next Cathara grid. So these are overlap areas. These are where these 2 combined. So it's a 0 point where the Mana force literally remanifests itself. It'll be what some people would call a monadic point, where there's another God seed there, a reflection of the original one that started the first. So there's another matrix that it creates. Now, let's see. Oh, and okay, Rions are, just like we have Trions and Mijans, the Rions go with the Manu, okay? Trions, okay, let's see. I have to look. Okay, protons, they're whatever up on, are they protons? Yeah, no, they're not. They're neutrons. That's right, Manu forms a neutron, so they are neutrons on the density 4 level. There we go. Yeah, don't mind me, I'm learning this too. Okay. Particle spin. So this is where you get cosmos and parallel cosmos. All right? Same thing happens when you get down here, and there's whole bunches of these nested together that give you nesting clusters, and I won't even attempt to draw those quite yet. I have millions of drawings all over the place, and it's like, I wish I could do something easy like the flower of life. There's a lot more to it than that. There's like lots of those within lots of those, but they're actually based on 15, not on 7. Because really what's happening here is you get 7 up here, you also get 7 down here. What certain systems are working with are simply 7 because they've cut off the top half, because they're not working with those frequencies anymore. So it's a little more complicated than basic flower of life stuff if people have learned that. It's like having 2 flower of life stuck together at the center. So you'd have one up there, and one down here. Now, when we get down here, so you have your higher 7 heavens up there, right? Then you have your lower 7 heavens down here. Okay? Again, the primal light fields, that overlap point. D13 is considered the triveka point. And that's when this stuff down here links into that stuff up there. The D12 biveka point is where this stream of, or this time matrix and its parallel link together at D12, and from D12 they link into the triveka point at D13 to link into the whole matrix. So this is the nesting of systems and parallel systems. When we come down, we're now into the rays. We went from the domains, which are not dimensionalized in quite the same way as three-dimensional holograms. They're different types of reality fields that are different. The hologram is not as externalized there as it is here. It's more of states of consciousness, and like, imagine living in your own mind and your mind was endless, and you could make any pictures you wanted to or create anything you wanted to, but you were never outside of yourself. It's hard to explain what the consciousness is like there. It's experiential. You need to be able to touch it and be it. Words don't work very well for it. But then when you get into the rays, the 15 ray emanations of the Akasha, these are when these currents up here, these pulses of consciousness, these fields of consciousness, break down further, polarize further, to become the lower currents that form the dimensionalized systems. These are the systems that matter as we know it can take place in. These are the three-dimensional systems that you can get holograms to walk around in. Okay? You have the D15, just like over there. You had the number 10 of the domains is the same thing as number 15 of the dimensions, right? See how these overlap? Number 11 of the domains is the same place as D14 in the rays, all right? These are the rays. Domain 12 is the same place, the blue flame 0 point, okay, Manau point, as D13 blue flame, which would be the same place if you're going up this way. You end up the same place you would be if you came down that way. These are the same places, all right? They're just showing you in relation to, here's the rays of emanation where they're breaking down further. And they are the original stationary, eternal fields of consciousness. These are eternal fields of consciousness that never, they don't live and die in the same way we do here. They exist always. They be. And they know themselves as being. And it's a whole different game once you get into the higher seven heavens. But while you're in the lower seven heavens, that's where you have linear time and space projection and the holograms that go with it. So from there, from primal light fields coming down, these are the rays. Now, these rays, we had these already. We talked about what the names. We had the Ki Rashe, primal light fields, D13, 14, and 15. That's those. Now, when we get into density 4, here's where it starts to get fun. We start to find out what these currents are that are running through our bodies, and we start to be able to place where certain words are that we've heard here and there in different mystical schools, and nobody really knows quite what anybody's running because they don't know what the words mean anymore. They might have meant something in the ancient past, but the text that gave you what the translation was have been gone for a long time. So when we start coming downwards, still moving down, we're at density 4, D12. Now we know that's our Maharic shield, right? That's the place where our scalar grid connects directly into the universal scalar grid. D12, the sound, the frequency is called the Ma'a. The consciousness is called the Ma'a. It is made of rheon units. Now remember, rheons go with Manau force. Okay, so where you see rheons, or rayons, or ionons, or neutrons, they are manifestations of the Manau force. And the other two have their own manifestations. We'll talk about it as we go. So this is a Manau field. D12 is a Manau field. Its sound tone is Ma'a. D11 is called the Hara. That's a trion field. It's made of trion units. Now trions they come out of the Manet. All right, so that's the Manet field. And D10 is the Ta'a. That's a Miaj field, or Mijan field. That comes out of the Ire. So again, you have the combination here of those three currents. You put them together, you get Maharata, the Maharata, the D12 Christos frequency that we use all the time. We talk about the Maharic this and the Maharic that and the Maharic everything else. This is where that's coming from. There's a couple in here that are a riot. When you start to see when people are pulling things out and like they only use half of one and combine it with something else when it's not supposed to be combined that way, and some of the names you come up with. Very interesting. I'll show you that one in a minute. Okay. Now, we come down into density 3. This would be our Turic shields in our own DNA template. The next level coming down would be the Turic shield in our body, and it would be this is the universal level, this is the galactic level. This is where we plug into the galaxies, all right, where we plug into the galactic template here. D9, the current is called the Yana. it's composed of, the next step down of a rheon is a rayon. So the D9 yana is the next embodiment of the Manu force. The D8 maya is composed of units called ectrons. An ectron is the next step down from a trion. So when you're in density 4, you have a trion. In density 3, that same thing becomes an ectron. It's a smaller quantity of thrust of the same consciousness. All right. D7 is called the mira. It's composed of iron units, which are broken down meson units. All right, so that takes you into density 3. Now, go into density 2. The D6 current is called the treya. It's an ionon current. Okay, ionons are broken down rayons, which are broken down rheons. All right, see how that works? It's breaking the frequencies down into smaller pieces, the pulses of consciousness down into smaller pieces. All right, so we have the D6 treya, the D5 mana, not mane, but mana, but it's of the mane. And these units, what used to be ectrons up here and used to be trions up here, trions become ectrons, become dions in D5. So D5 current is a dion current, and it is the mana force. D6 current is a treya current. It is made of ionons. These are telling you exactly what the primary units, or particle manifestations, are of each of these currents, and the sound tones that go with them. Now, take it down one more. Oh, we didn't do D4 yet. D4. Here's a familiar word that I haven't heard any good definition for in ages. Prana. The prana is made of mayan units. The mayan units used to be iron units, used to be miaj units. So the prana is a manifestation of the ire. Now you can look at this on a Catharo grid, and you would see the middle one would be the mana. And I don't have this done yet. I just didn't have time to do the graph last night. It would have taken too long because I had to hook 2 Catharo grids together, like piece by piece with the word processing program. It's not fun to draw those. But you would have the mane currents running down the middle. You would have over on, when you're looking at it on your left, and it's actually on the right side of your body, you would have the mano currents, and the ire currents would be on the other side. So in your own bodies, on your left side, you have your divine feminine running the ire currents, and on your right side, you have the mano currents, and in the middle, you have the mane currents. And they use a Catharo grid structure to interact with each other, and each level of your body is composed, like if you're dealing with your fifth, let's say you're dealing with chakra 8. This is what it's made out of. This is why science can't see it yet, because they don't know how to detect these other interdimensional particles, because they exist at a shift of angular rotation of particle spin. And down here, between here and here, between one dimension, one set of dimensions, one harmonic universe and the next, there's a 45-degree shift of angular rotation of particle spin. So basically, they're looking at particles that are spinning here with microscopes made out of particles that are spinning here, and they are not seeing the things that are spinning in the same place, in the same space, but at a different angle of rotation axis. That's what's going on here, and it's kind of really funny because it's all right under our noses. It's more than under our noses. It's embedded in our bodies. You know, it's right with us. But it seems like it's very far away. Now, from these 15 ray emanations, we get another set, a smaller set, of what were the 7 heavens. We get the 7 lower heavens. We get 3 here. 1, 2, 3, the 3 huva bodies, right? And they're parallels. We go with them because this is a splitting thing that happens at D12, and then the 7th is D12, just like the 7th up there is D13. Okay, and it's D13 and D12 that link together, that form the trivecca and bivecca points. That's the points where the original manifestation went this far, and then it went even further into the lower rays, the dimensional frequencies. The process of ascension is the process of reintegrating all these pieces of ourself and our consciousness and progressively expanding upward through these frequencies. And as we integrate all these frequencies into our body, we get less dense because our particles progressively transmute, where we have down here D3. This is called the ray. The D3 current, it's made of neutrons. Neutrons are broken down ionons. So the ray used to be the treya up here in density 2, used to be the yana up here in density 3, used to be the ma up here. That's the manu current. the D3 current, neutrons, used to be ions, ionons. Then you have D2 currents called the key. That's the electron current. Electrons used to be dions. In density 2, they are dions. Dions are density 2 electrons. Okay? That's how this works. D1, chi. All right? Chi is the proton current, which is the ERA current, which used to be the prana current. See how these interact with each other? So what you're going to do, if you're going to transmute and you want to go through a Stargate and pop up on Tara, what you need to do is you need to change your protons, electrons, and neutrons into myons, dions, and ionons. Okay? And in other words, you would take your chi, your ki, and your ri, and you would make it prana, mana, and treya. What you also learn is that you can begin, once you clear the system, get the system healed enough where it is capable of doing Merkaba, it's very easy to get where you want to go once you know the sounds. You simply think them to yourself, and the vibration sends you there instantly. The vibration is the thought, is the direction. So we're going to be using tonight, when I don't know if we're going to have time to do it before dinner. What time are we supposed to go to dinner? About now? Oh, okay. We'll do it when we get back. Okay. Oh, okay. I'll do this. I will discuss this when we get back, because it's going to take me 45 minutes. No, I'll show it, though. I got to. I worked so hard on this one. This is the one we're going to discuss as soon as we get back, that shows you how it fits into your atoms. That was tough. Thank you. This is an atom, and this shows you exactly where what fields are, where they're supposed to be, what current they're made out of, and this nasty little line of sparks down here are where they're blocked, either half blocked or whole blocked. You see the amount of current that is blocked out of what are our atoms going to look like once we get them back to what they're supposed to be. I mean, it's bad enough that we have, like, if you look at the DNA, we've had courses where we've taught about the DNA, and we've taught that right now we're supposed to have 12 full chromosomes per 12 strands. Human beings are supposed to have 144 chromosomes. We're floating around somewhere between 44 and 46, I think, and they're trying to get us to, isn't that the range? I don't even remember. All I know is it doesn't matter what they're counting, because right now there are cherries that have more chromosomes than humans do. And science couldn't figure out quite why this is, because you would think that the bigger and more complex a life form was, you would think it would have more chromosomes. But right now, science kind of like, interesting, because you have cherries and like some types of blades of grass that, yeah, tree frogs and things, that some of them having many more chromosomes than human beings do. So it was like, not a general rule of thumb here. How does this work? Right now, because our chromosomes are broken down and suppressed out of our natural DNA template that would naturally have, I skipped over the part about fire letters. Okay, we'll talk about fire letters a bit when we get back this evening. Because this is where, when we talk about fire letters, we're talking about the chelons that form in each, remember, part of chi, part of k, part of cum, form chelons that form specific groups of Partakai grids that make the flash lines for each dimension. Well, our templates, when we talk about the scalar wave templates of our DNA or of a planetary shield, these are made of very specific mathematical groupings of chelons that are called chelon codes, or fire letters. The DNA is made out of fire letters, just like the planetary shields are made out of fire letters. Fire letters are the units, or the mathematical programs of frequency in the template that, once it is fired or turned on, allows the corresponding portions of the mana or the ire or the mane to run through the body. When you fire the fire letters in the DNA, you turn on chromosomes. We have a bunch of fire letters turned off in the DNA, so we have a bunch of chromosomes. They're not just turned off. They've been mutilated, where literally what science can look at now as the gene code is looking at what used to be, there's something called vector codes. Vector codes are little tiny things that are inside fire letters, that are inside DNA templates. But if you take a vector code, there are supposed to be 12 primary vector codes for one chromosome. And for one chromosome, now there would be 12 of those blueprints for 12 chromosomes in one DNA strand, and that's one double helix DNA strand. Okay? What we're looking at now, what science is seeing right now, is of those 12 vector codes that are supposed to be repeated 12 times to form those 12 chromosomes, there are the numbers 12, 11, 10, and 9 are completely shut off, which means the frequencies from D12, 11, 10, and 9 have not been able to run into the body or into the chromosomes. Then the 8 remaining ones were cut in half, literally half blocked and half turned off, which left 8 half chromosomes, or the equivalent, or like 8 half vector codes, or which is the equivalent of 4. It can run 4 partial dimensions of frequency. What this has done is literally take what's supposed to be a gene chain and cut it apart. So the genes are smaller than what they're supposed to be. There's more space or junk DNA in between gene sequences because there's all these areas that are turned off. It has created chromosomes that if you look at them as little egg-shaped things, and there's supposed to be 12 of them lined up together. This is another graph that I'm working on that I haven't had time to get finished yet. But you cut the top of them all off, and then you cut half of each little pieces of them off, so you only have 4 little dots left, operational in each. That's what they're calling our chromosome content. They're saying that for strand 1, 2, 3, and part of 4. That's where they're getting our chromosome count. They're counting literally ripped apart chromosomes and thinking that that's the whole picture because they have nothing else to compare it to. They don't know what else is supposed to be there because anything on the planet right now is carrying this mutation, including something that might have died 2 million years ago that originally had the right stuff. Because as soon as you take those frequencies out of the planetary grids by blocking the grids, it makes the elements that carry those frequencies disappear, like radioactive decay type stuff. They literally go out of manifestation. So you could die with a 12-strand DNA template and be totally preserved in ice with your 12-strand DNA template and found as the Iceman someplace on a mountain in our contemporary times. Your DNA would still reflect the mutation of a base 4 genetic mutation that we are carrying right now, even if you didn't have it when you died, because those materials can no longer manifest themselves on the planet. So what we're doing when we're healing, what we're doing when I'll get into explaining more of this when we get back, and then we'll get into playing with the sounds once we know what they are and what they do. What's exciting is being able to take a look into your atoms and see that when you're using the sounds, exactly what you're going to be doing. So you know what you're doing when you use the sounds. But what we're doing, this is all. These atoms, they're connected to the DNA template. These mutations are the reflection of the mutations of the chromosomes that are a reflection of the mutations of the vector codes that are a reflection of the mutations of fire letters that the DNA is composed of. And all of these things are frequencies running in the bodies, and every one of these things connect directly to the Merkaba field and the Merkaba vehicle. All right, the Merkaba vehicle is that thing that sends the life force currents down, that spirals them in to where they form the bubble that we're walking around in. The currents are blocked out in the planetary grids because the planetary Merkaba has those frequencies shut off in it. It shuts off our frequencies. Our planetary Merkaba has been spinning in reverse since 25,500 BC. Only half in reverse. The time period right now is going to be a determining factor where it goes fully in reverse or it gets pulled back around the way it needs to be, which would be a good thing. That would be the Christos realignment mission. So these are all connected, all these parts of anatomy and the radial body, that tissue capsule that's around each three-dimensional level of you, that's actually the little atomic one for your next big body up. But the ones we're going to work with are the ones inside. That's the ones that are going to be affected by the sound tones that we work, and if they're affected, they're going to shift the ones above it as well. This is going to be literally your whole self working with itself, co-creating with itself. Not like, well, I'll see my soul when I get to Tara, but you're going to start working with it directly. You're going to start being it because you're going to start to embody these frequencies. So I think that's probably a good place to stop. We're all going to keep going. That we've been doing as part of the round table work. This is what we're activating first with the tribal shield sound tones, and that begins activating part of the Turic shield, which is the part of you that connects to the galactic shield, and your Maharic shield is the one that we're all using when we use the D12 frequency and activate the the Maharic seal and the Maharic shield. You're activating this one. So now you know what density we're dealing with, what shield we're dealing with, and here is how the currents break down for each one of them. These can be read going down this way. They can also be read going over. So you can see this is the E ray. So the E ray here in density 1 has ray 1 is dimension 1. The dimension 1 frequencies, that's the chi. That's the protons. All right? It manifests here as our proton content. If you came over here in density 2, it manifests as ray 4, the prana, made of myons, which are density 2 protons. You can bring it over here, density 3, it makes ray 7, the mire, the density 3. Here, ray 10, the ta'a, is made of muons, which is the density 4 protons. So see how you can read this. You can read this to find out the E-ray currents and run them across. This gives you, on the Cathara grid, the 1, 4, 7, 10 side of the Cathara grid. This one will give you the middle pillar in the Cathara grid. You have the Manet manifests as ray 2 in density 1. That's the key. That's the electrons, where the electrons are manifesting from. If you bring that over to density 2, it goes from ray 2 to making ray 5, and that's the mana, and that's made of dions, density 2 electrons. Over here you have ray 8, the maya. They're ectrons, and this has to do with the formation of what's called ectoplasm. There's a strange substance that people, mediums particularly, have seen when they do a type of channeling where there's full integration of something from the higher dimensions coming into the medium's body, which we don't recommend at all. But there's a trace at times left behind. It looks like little filaments, little kind of, it's hard to describe, almost like little fiberglass filaments that aren't quite manifest matter, but they're kind of like hairy-looking little filaments called ectoplasm. That's stuff that's made out of the ectrons here. So they're dealing with the ray 8 maya, and some of it would be the mana. So this is what ectoplasm is really composed of. And if you brought it down, what you're dealing with are electrons, really, but in the higher dimensions. Okay. Now, you'd read this, you bring that over, so you have your 2, 5, 8, and 11. 11 in density 4 is the hara. That's the name of that particular ray. And it's made of trions. It's the density 4 electrons. And then here is the mana one. Now, this is the one we're going to be using most often, because this is the original mana ray that actually directs the other two. It's the strongest one. So we will be using, when we're using the Vecca codes. The Vecca codes are specifically the mana codes that controls these and therefore controls the rest of the things that came out of these. All right, so this is the mana line that would be the ray. It's ray 3, dimension 3. It's called the ray, R-E-I. All right, this is where you get Reiki. These are the two frequencies that the Reiki healer people are working with right here. All right, and I'll show you in a minute what they do as far as this goes, as far as this atom goes. This is the anatomy of an atom, like science here has never seen. Right? Okay, so the Manu codes go from ray 3, D3, the ray current, which is a neutron current, to ray 6, which is the Treya, and they're ions, that's density 2 neutrons, to the ray 9, Yana, rayons, density 3 neutrons, to ray 12, the Ma'a, which is made of rheons, density 4 neutrons. All right, you go up here too, there's a lot more information that was brought through about the seven heavens, the higher and lower heavens, and we'll be getting more on that. There's more graphs that I would like to, wish I'd had time to do for you to break that down, but there's at least a little summary of those things here that will help you. It also gives you, from the seven lower heavens here, it tells you about the D12 Biveka point. The density 4 Maharata, universal Christos, liquid light, pre-matter, divine blueprint, is the seventh lower heaven that holds the D12 Biveka point. It's the Manu connection point between the three lower heavens, or harmonic universes, of one time matrix and those of its parallel time matrix, and the point where both connect to the primal Kirushe light fields of the cosmic Cathara grid in the seven higher heavens via the D13 Manu connection point, which would be the Tri-Veka point. So when we're using the Veka codes, the Bi and Tri-Veka, what we're doing is we're activating these two portions of the Manu frequency, the portion that goes with D12 and the portion that goes with D13. Right? This activates things, if you think of our 15-dimensional anatomy, it's activating things up in the higher levels, like that are connecting our D12 and D13 aspects of being. But what it's doing in our atoms, it's connecting things out here. The Biveka and Tri-Veka points would be out here. If the nucleus of your atom is here, and then there's different rings of fields and forces and protons and electrons and things that come out of that. And eventually you get to the point where you have space between atoms, right? where what's between, there's something between one atom or another, they'd all just be one blob. All right. This area here, these areas that are colored, are the Manaw areas here. This area, you have your D3, your D6, and this goes into the D8, 11, 9, 12. That's actually, the 8 is here, and the 8 line itself isn't part of the void, but that's the crossover point. These would be the void spaces, the fields that are happening between your atoms. So these points here, when we're working with activating or reactivating chakras and things in your outer fields, like way up in your auric fields around your bodies, but it's also working with activating these things. You have D13 here, you have D12 here. This is where you have the biveka and triveka points, and here you have the Manaw force directly coming in. This connects directly into the original Manaw force, the original void or point space, which is the one that can't be compromised as far as its content. If you have D6 frequency, let's say, D6 frequency here, this would be a manifestation of the Manaw force. That would be the Treya force, for instance. Now, that can be twisted. It can be twisted and used for negative purposes. That in the phantom matrix, they have a Treya frequency, and they are using it for purposes that are not part of the Christos. But once you get up to the original Manaw, the original point, the original Akasha, the Manaw cannot be corrupted. And that original non-corrupted space of the Manaw, the Ire and the Mane, in your bodies, any of the portions of your bodies that are carrying any corruptions in the Manaw force or any of the others will progressively begin to heal and go back to their original pattern, their original intention. So when we're working with these codes, we're working with the highest and the lowest ones. We're working with the highest codes, the high Veka codes, which are the last one we were given was the Akasha code. And we have the Biveka and the Triveka, and the Q-Veka, the Dao-Veka, and the Ra-Veka. These were the first 5 of the codes that we were given to work with. And what they do is they activate the real high stuff, the stuff that would be the space between the atoms in your bodies, where there's supposed to be the natural light fields that plug you into the original Manaw forces. So when we're working with those codes, we're working with these. They're also working with the higher chakras that correspond to the like D13, 14, and 15. If we're working with those frequencies, we're working with the chakras as well. The 13th chakra is down in Earth core. The 14th chakra is up above our heads. And the 15th is literally on the opposite side of the planet, but way out into outer space. If you drew a direct line through yourself and kept going through the planet and way out into outer space on the other side, that's where you'd find your 15th chakra. It's way out there. It really literally connects you to the universal template, to the primary light fields. So when all of these things are connected, when we work with Veka codes, when we work with any of the sound tones, we are affecting our Merkaba fields, those spinning, spiraling currents of energy around our bodies, which are also around every one of our cells in our bodies. Every one of our atoms has its own little mini Merkaba. Every one of our DNA strands, every one of our chromosomes is built on mini Merkabas, little tiny spiraling frequencies of electromagnetic energy that are supposed to have a certain spin rate, and they're supposed to go in a certain direction to bring these currents in to form the form constant, that little ball in the middle that gives you a place where manifestation can take place. All right. Now, the mutations that have taken place on this planet that have kept us literally imprisoned within our own cells for, once you come in here, you come in fetal integration. And in fetal integration is a process by which the soul, or you as an identity that doesn't have a body on you yet, comes into manifestation here, into the physical, into density 1 physicality. That's done, it is not done at conception. It cannot be done at conception. I've talked about this before. There are 33 to 55 days, 56 days, it usually takes before the fetal pattern composed of the mother tissue and the father tissue and the life force that they brought into it, before that can grow large enough and strong enough to hold the essence of a consciousness coming from another dimensional field coming into it. If fetal integration was attempted before the 33rd day, it would literally blow that pattern of energy apart. It would kill the fetus. It would result in a natural miscarriage. So when we do fetal integration, it's not done at conception. We may have a contract for that body. Yeah, when it's ready, I'll come into that one. But it is not somebody different at the time of conception. The potentiality for individuation and for individual life has created a conception. But whether that will become an individual life does not actually take place until soul integration takes place, or fetal integration. Fetal integration is the process by which the part of every being that is connected to the divine blueprint, your avatar level of self, sends down an anchoring rod of frequency, a little spark of D12 frequency, and it anchors into the fetal body in the first of the first 8 cells that were formed in the fetal body. That's why we use a lot of, when we work with Merkaba, we use certain techniques that deal with the tailbone and what is in the tailbone. Because the tailbone, inside of the tailbone, there are the first 8 cells that are created when the fetus starts to take on a life of its own, following the imprint from its combined mother-father pattern. When we go into the first of the first 8 cells, we're going into that original cave of creation in the body that you came into when you were anchoring as a consciousness into the physicality of the body. Now, when we do fetal integration here, because of the distortions of the planetary Merkaba, we immediately pick up those distortions in consciousness. And it's like lights out. As soon as you come in, you go back to sleep. You don't know who you are anymore, because half of you is like stuck. You have your D4 astral body that can't communicate with your D3, your D2, and your 1 body anymore. So you don't remember who you are. You don't remember what you came to do. All you know is you wake up and you notice fuzzy light and dark movements around, and you hear sounds that you don't remember what the languages are yet, and you do the whole baby thing, coming into the space as a baby. But what's interesting is because of that original spark of a little bit of D12 frequency, the first of the first 8 cells, there's a state that comes in with you, even if you can't process the middle frequencies that would give you a full conscious understanding of who you are and what you're here to do. There is a spark of cognition that comes in, of your Christos self, and that spark gives you, as an infant, this very interesting state of consciousness. The at-one-ment is there. Most infants, at least infants that are born through a human or an indigo imprint, it's a little bit different for Leviathan races, which are the hybrid races that are born without a Christos spark, because they're not incarnating from a Christos matrix. They're coming from someplace that has reverse coding that doesn't have the D12 Christos frequency. But for people, most people are coming in on the indigo and the human imprint. When they get into body, they're able to bring in the cognition of a piece of the oneness, because they're able to carry the Manau a bit in that first of the first 8 cells. The Manau, the first of the first 8 cells, is the meeting place in the body, the first meeting place for the Manau, the Mene, and the Ire. They come together there. And this is why we work with, when we're doing certain types of Merkaba activations, we'll work with that cell, because that is where we can begin to open up right into the body, and if we open it up into the body at D1, it begins to come through. Where's D1? And this is hard because they're not all in order here, if you'll notice. All right, it'll bring it in to here, into the proton fields. The real window of Manau, if you want to call it, is here in the center of neutrons. Okay? The D3 neutrons. Now neutrons, what our scientists see and call neutrons, are actually part of the D3, the third dimensional particle field. They're the ray, okay, the REI sound frequencies. They manifest as neutrons, and what they're supposed to have at their core is this little Manau window that actually can open and close. We're supposed to be able to open and close it at will, just by intention. When the body needs to have some more energy, this would naturally open and let all of these other currents, more of them, come in. It would be another pulse of consciousness that would come in. The pulse of consciousness that keeps our bodies going is supposed to come back and forth through the little window in the center of our neurons. And then there's a communication that takes place between there, where that information gets sent in the form of frequency all the way down through the different levels of the atomic structure, each one of which carries one of the primal currents. You literally have the 12 currents are supposed to be running here, and then you have the current, and when you get into this space, you're actually in the place of the spaces between the cells. This is what's happening, that you're activating this stuff when you start to feel that really odd sensation that I talked about yesterday, about feeling like the wind was blowing in between the spaces between my cells. I had an experience where I actually could feel. And it's a very weird feeling at first. It's like you feel two-dimensional. You feel like you're made of air. You start to begin to feel the reality of the statement that your body is a thought form. you begin to realize, wow, it really is, isn't it? It's not as dense as we usually feel that it is. When we begin to activate the mana and the higher life forces within our bodies and start bringing these distortions back into alignment, this starts to align and activate, which means these currents begin to move in through the bodies. They begin to speak to the center of the neurons. What's supposed to happen in transmutation if we decide we want to go through a Stargate? All of these things are supposed to be able to activate. As long as they can all activate, you can bring your whole atom through. The parts of your atom that are blocked, and right now these are the parts that are blocked, which I'll talk about in a minute. These are the parts that wouldn't make it through a Stargate right now. All right? Naturally, when these things aren't here, and all these currents are flashing on and off in their natural order the way they're supposed to, you would go through a Stargate. The Stargate would have the similar type structure in its own structure, and you would intend to go through it. You would be able to turn every part of you into superluminal particles, which means the particles that are down here, you turn them into these. These you turn into these you turn into these you turn into these. This is what you're doing. You're literally upscaling the vibration or the frequency, the upscaling oscillation of the units that your physicality is composed of. Right now, because these currents cannot circulate and they cannot come in, this can't activate. The window that's supposed to allow the mana force to come through so you can turn yourself into light and then turn yourself back into matter again, this has been taken away from us. The ability has been taken away from us because of what has been done to the neutron window. That little black mark there is frequencies fully blocked by D9 through the frequencies that are fully blocked. All right. Now these are blocked through the grid distortions that we've talked about in the Templar course. That whole Templar manual gets into why they're blocked and how that's happening. But what it results in is these little black marks are the frequencies that are fully blocked, like completely turned off. Let's say if they have corresponding DNA to them, different chemicals that would naturally manifest, right? If they were turned on the way they're supposed to be. They're turned off by having frequency, scalar wave blockages because of certain sound frequencies that are being run through the planet. They're being blocked. The ones that are being fully blocked are the D9 through D12 and higher currents. So that takes you out here to these. You have, let's see, where did the D9 go? That one's supposed to be there. Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah, we have this one. D9 is blocked. D8, 7, 8, 9, no, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 9. No, I'm trying to think. I want to see why I have this here. Why do I have this one down here? Yeah, all right, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are blocked. So these things are completely shut off. That means all of these currents that would normally, you would have the D11, the Hara current, you actually have the Hara shut off. There's something that's coming in from D8 that's passing itself off as our Hara line. The Hara line is what runs down, it's a frequency that runs down the center pillar in our bodies. Most of it's turned off right now. What we're calling Hara isn't even really Hara. It's the one below it. It's actually the Maya line, the frequency that's running down, and it shouldn't be. There are reversals that are taking place because of this, where wherever these things are, there's partial reversals, which means you would have part D10 and say part D7 instead of D10 and D7 where it belongs. They've scrambled the pieces of the frequencies, which means they've scrambled the amount of electrons and protons and neutrons that we're supposed to have in our atomic structure. So the cells don't know how to talk to themselves anymore. This is why the body dies so early. It has a very short lifespan because all the natural currents keep getting blocked up and they create more blockages from the original. It's like once the blockages come and the currents try to come in and their natural pulses of consciousness, the body cells can't hold it. The neuron windows can't open and the frequency builds up around the area where it's supposed to go in and around where the blockages are in the template, in your scalar wave template, and it begins to crush your natural scalar wave template, which means it begins to shatter the vibrational frequencies that they're normally carrying. And that creates holes in your template, which creates more blockages where the energy can't flow. So literally, the body consumes itself because it can't process its own natural life force frequencies. When we work with the Vecca codes, what we're doing is using the codes that correspond to the levels of the mana, which are the blue shaded areas. We're going to use those codes to progressively reset the natural patterns of the mana. And because all of the other rays come out of the mana rays, once the mana rays are restored, it will progressively flip over the natural order, the natural mathematical sequencing in the other parts of the cells. And this doesn't just happen in your cells. Your chakras are going through the same things. Every one of your chakras is supposed to have these sub-frequencies running through them. And all of these frequencies are blocked. The 9 through 12 is blocked. And this is because, what I was talking about earlier, when I was talking about DNA, if we have a DNA strand, that DNA strand has something called fire letters in it. It's supposed to have 12 fire letters. Now, fire letters are groups of chelons, which are groups of Partakai units, which are groups of flash line sequences. Okay. Now, you're supposed to have 12 fire letters, and every fire letter is supposed to have 12 vector codes. All right, vector codes are the codes that correspond to the sub-frequency bands in each dimension. What they've done by the frequencies that are being transmitted on this planet, what has been done is, of those 12, it's like a little Cathara grid inside every chromosome that we're supposed to have. That would be the vector codes. There's supposed to be 12 of them. They've turned off 12, 11, 10, and 9. Completely neutralized it where you don't have that operating anymore. And that's happening in the DNA, and because it's happening in the DNA, when the cells manifest, those things are completely not manifest at all, as if they never existed. What they also did was, of the 8 remaining vector codes in each chromosome, in each fire letter, they turned off half of those, of the 8 remaining, leaving 8 half vector codes, which left 8 half chromosome pieces in the gene code, and they reversed the active half. So right now, what our bodies are doing is running on a reverse matrix. The elements on this planet right now are running on a reverse matrix, and some elements hold that better than others. Elements such as crystal, like quartz crystal, and crystal-based substances are very, very powerful. They hold whatever frequencies. They are frequency holders and transmitters. And if you happen to have a planet with its Merkaba reversed, they will hold that program. But right now, we're very compatible with reverse matrix programs on this planet because our bodies are running on them too. That's why we feel a resonance with the crystals, and the crystals feel a resonance with us. We're all in the same boat. You have crystal, you have gold, silver, and platinum are the elements that hold the strongest. They are able to hold the strongest amount and concentration of the natural currents that come from the Mane, the Ire, and the Manao. This is why they're precious substances. They have unique qualities. They have the ability to hold large amounts and transmit large amounts of these primal currents. If their molecular content on their atomic level is carrying reversals, they have a very strong ability to hold reversals into whatever they touch. So you think of all the gold veins and silver veins and platinum veins and crystal veins running through the planet. These could either be used to make or break this place. If they are running on a reverse matrix, they can make sure that this planet literally goes into a fall, which would be having its shields reversed completely and ending up in the phantom matrix black hole system. All right, same thing's happening in our bodies. Now, there are ways we can heal ourselves. There are ways we can heal crystals and metals and those kind of things, so we can help each other to get back on the right track, where we're getting our life force back and our original blueprint back. There's going to be techniques we're given tomorrow where we begin to play with the 3 forces, the Mana, the Ire, and the Mane. And we begin to learn to work with crystals, first within our bodies, because technically, chelons, Partakai units that form chelons, which are 3-dimensional scalar wave groupings, are crystals, the crystallizations of frequency, thought crystals, if you want to look at them that way. So we're going to learn how to communicate and begin to heal using those primal organic forces to heal the crystalline structure within our own bodies, and we will be able to therefore also begin to heal the crystal structures of Earth. So if you have favorite crystals and those kind of things, right now there are programs being run through the planetary grids to amplify their reversals, to make sure they help your crystals in your body to stay reversed. Well, once you know the game and understand what's going on, and you know the natural mathematical templates that are supposed to be held by the radio bodies of elements here, which are the Manau codes, you can begin to heal it in yourself and also begin to heal the crystals that you like and the crystals in the whole planetary grid and the metals. So we're going to have tomorrow morning after the ordinations that are at 7, somewhere around 7:30, however long it takes us to do the ordinations. From about 7:30 till 8:30, we're going to do till about 8. We're going to do a salutation, and then we're going to go into learning to work with the new techniques that they're going to give me for tomorrow. Now tonight, before we leave, we're going to do the one I was talking about as far as using the sound tones to begin, the Surya tones, to begin activating the natural Vecca codes, the Manau Vecca codes, that will begin freeing this up. What's going to be interesting is I've been told that these things, particularly when you're working with the high Veccas, if you've been working at all with the high Veccas that have been out, you know, like piece by piece, we've been getting the high Vecca codes out for a little while. If you've been working with them, they're already active in your system. Once you've been doing that and you start to use the Manau codes, a little hint was given to me that you can actually start to feel and experience results rather quickly. It's not like one of those that, well, in 10 years, maybe I'll be able to feel the wind blow between my cells, you know what I mean? So I'm not quite sure what that means yet, because we haven't begun working with the Manau codes either. We're doing this with you. It's not as if we did this 10 years ago and now we're just come back to let you know about it. You know, we're walking through the process with you. So this diagram, I hope, and you will have like a copy of this and whatever we manage to get together on paper in a functional format for you for tomorrow to take home, which I'm determined to have a chart pack for you. I really am. Yeah. This will be one of the charts in the chart pack. This one will help you to understand if you want to remember anything about what you learned in Dance for Life, right? There, Dance for Life. The first thing you want to learn is, okay, I'm supposed to use these codes. Okay, I got the code, because you'll have the code, the picture of the code, what I do with the code, you'll have that. What is it doing? This is where this graph comes in. Oh, okay, now this was this frequency. You'll be able to remind yourself what exactly you're doing when you're using the codes. You'll also start to find other connections start to come to you, like, ooh, I bet you could do that, couldn't you? Yeah, you could combine that and that, and it sounds like that. And I bet, yeah, I could use that for something. You'll start to get inspiration from the Manau within you, where it starts to guide you into different ways, personally, that you could use it maybe for healing, or maybe for shifting a situation in your life that you're not pleased with, and it seems like one of those round, you know, circle, like CD player type dramas that no matter what you do, you seem to be on the CD player and you're going to keep going round and round and round. There's some arguments that happen like that with people, and they've literally been having them for like 25 billion years or so. And you put them together and they come into each other's hologram and they still do the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's because the miasmic core, the distorted core that started that separation between them, where they were not, their frequencies weren't blending so they couldn't understand each other, it was never healed. It's still there, and no matter where you put them in space-time, when they come back together, they will come back together in conflict to try to resolve it, and they will go round and round with it. Most of us are living this over and over. There are races on the planet right now that we're each living out part of a race drama. This is what we're seeing right now between the Muslim people and the Christian people. We're seeing it between the Muslim people and the Jewish people. The Muslim people, this is their time for clearing miasms, because they're getting into it all over the place. People are picking on them, they're picking on other people. This is ancient stuff from before Atlantis that's coming through now. So we're watching the victim-victimizer drama come up, and everybody feels victimized by it, regardless of whether they're the ones starting it or finishing it. Everybody feels they're being picked on by the other side. I mean, Mr. Bush is standing out there saying the axis of evil, oh, here we go. You know, that's a real friendly way to approach this. This is not going to get you anywhere but into a big fight eventually, because you're making the other person wrong. Doesn't matter what they feel, what they think. Axis of evil means I've judged you as unworthy. We're right, we're good, you're wrong, you're bad, therefore we have a right to go do something to you, right? This is what's taking place right now in the victim-victimizer drama. And we're going to see more and more of this. If you want to know a little bit more about that, read Voyagers Volume 2, 2nd edition. We touched a little bit on some of the things that are going to be coming here because of it. I won't get into that in this Dance for Life workshop because that's another subject matter. But in the meantime, of all the chaos of victim-victimizer coming up inside of us, outside of us, all around us, everywhere, it's nice to know that we can begin to make a difference right in our own cells. It starts right in our own cells. The Manau part of consciousness is a part of the consciousness of God that is a part of the consciousness of you. Once you begin to open that in you, it is the still point. It is a point where just knowing is. It has a quality to it. The Manau consciousness doesn't think like we think about thinking. It doesn't believe, it knows. There's a difference between thinking and believing and simply just knowing. It carries that knowing of direct cognition. Do you ever get those things where you can't tell why, but it's just like a hunch, you just knew something. Can't figure out why. You didn't even really believe anything about it, maybe. It just hit you, and you just knew. And once you know, it expands in you. And no matter what anybody tells you to believe, you're not going to change it. It's just there. It's knowing. It's the difference between knowing, which is of the spirit, and believing, which is of the lower mind. All right? You can choose to believe. You can have fun playing with your beliefs and seeing how they manifest out in the world. But beliefs and ideas are changeable. You'll find yourself in many different lives, growing through many different sets of them. But behind every set of beliefs, there is a common knowing. And the Manau holds that common knowing. So does the Ire and the Mane hold their own piece of it. But they're polarized, all right? They're the first polarization. So they will each have a piece, but neither have the whole. Each will seek the whole through the other. But the whole is where the point is still, it's not polarized, which is the point of the original, the first thought crystal, the first intention, the Manau. So when we begin to work with the Manau codes, the void codes, if you want to call them, they're the void codes. They begin to avoid the victim-victimizer drama, the polarity dramas. They begin to heal that, because that is the force that comes in, and it'll bring the portions of you that are made of Ire frequency and made of Mane frequency. It'll begin to bring those back together into the natural state of harmonization. So we're going to be able to create. We can't fix the world, because the world's a big place, and there's a lot of reverse things happening, and how the drama is going to turn out on this planet in the next 10 years is not quite known. Somewhere it is, because time is simultaneous, which means all this has already happened already. Right? Which means somebody knows the outcome, right? Which means, what does that mean? That means there are a number of potential outcomes from the place we stand in right now. It can go various different ways, depending on where the idea field, the collective thought field, goes in this particular time frame. There are places in the time matrix, in space-time, where things have gone well, where everything got fixed and it reached a very high level, and our race is evolving. It reverse mutated itself. It got its own identity back. It helped to heal the planet. Things went really, really, really well. There's a whole spectrum of possibilities between that extreme, which is the good extreme, and the other extreme, which would be it all goes to phantom matrix and becomes a real mess. Each of those things have happened, and several places, which would be critical points in that cycle, exist as options. Which one we will see isn't determined yet. It depends on where on a planetary level our frequencies, or the planetary shields, where they are in relation to their vibration and oscillation. They will be drawn into the future, what we call the future, or the place in space-time that's ahead of us, that co-resonates with where the planetary grids are. This goes with the macrocosmic aspects of our planet. It goes with some trees will end up in one place and some will end up somewhere else. It also goes for people. Now, the best case scenario that could happen for Earth is that it is able to heal its radial body enough, the radial body of the elemental kingdom and of the atmospheric kingdom, you could look at the atmosphere as like the aura around the planet, and the radial body would be a level of Trion and Mirage fields that are separating it from the next one, from Tara, which would be in density 2. If all of these things were healed, Earth would be able to come into alignment with what is called the transharmonic time cycle. The transharmonic time cycle is a time cycle that comes in frequency. It exists between the Earth time cycle and its parallel. Okay? There's a third one in the middle, the interfaces, and that's where we get the inner Earth, inner Terra, inner Gaia. That one has double the frequency of what is here. It's about double the frequency. This is what we were talking about when I was talking about the Akasha Merkaba, a specialized form of Merkaba, that if you're going to be in that transharmonic cycle, you need more than just 3 planes on the top and 3 planes on the bottom. They're sets of frequencies. You need 6. You need 12 sets of frequencies to be able to sustain in the inner fields. Some of us will be able to do this. Some of the planet, if ideally the whole planet, would be able to generate its own Akasha Merkaba. And in that case, it would literally shift into full alignment with a different time cycle, which would be the inner time cycles. This is a path of evolution that would be a leap. All right? The planet's not going to do that this time, because there's not enough time in this stellar activation cycle for it to reverse mutate its radial body that much. There's so much damage here that it can get part of itself through and in alignment. And the part of Earth that can go under this type of Merkaba and can hold these frequencies will be stabilized and balanced by literally linking with the inner Earth templates that are stabilized.